Okay, so do you do that thing where you pop out the window for the Discord call?
That's a thing? I should try that.
Yes. Yes, that's a thing.
Can you guys?
So first
Can
of
you
all,
guys
you
see it
want your
fine?
OBS
Can
or
you hear it
whatever you
fine?
use
Yeah.
for streaming.
Everything
You
looking?
need it to
Yeah,
not be like
everything's
full
going good.
size, and then it won't
Seeing.
ruin the pictures.
Okay.
But in Discord, you just pop out the window and then would just show the window of that specific thing, so it doesn't show your entire Discord. It's really yes, it's a thing.
Cool. So I put together some discussion questions for us, and I broadly I wanted to talk about platforming because the panel that I saw you in, you were really against Destiny platforming 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙. So, but I don't want it to become a we're going to talk about, Destiny platforming 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙 the whole time. So I don't really want to.
I don't mind. I don't mind bitching about Destiny platforming 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙 the entire time. I can do that. I guess if I could make a request, I know you guys are, well, I don't know you guys very well. But I think we're all pretty chill. People project a lot of shit on me, what they think feminists are, what they think lefties are, what they think Twitter people are. I just prefer us doing the thing where you just ask me for my opinion rather than try to imagine what it might be, because it will just shorten things,
We
love that,
hate mischaracterizing other people's positions, which seems to be like a common thing on the internet that people love to do. So Katie, what do you want me to call you on here? Are you a content creator? Or?
Leftist woke feminine. No.
Yes, yeah, I don't want to do that. So
I am a progressive. I am a feminist, and am I woke? You can just call me Katie. Katie, you don't need to add the, trust me, people will figure out the other stuff.
I can put progressives just so people know where you're coming from. I just don't want to give you a title, obviously. That's incendiary. Like 𝕬𝖎 made a joke about doing.
I'm fine with Queen Katie. I don't mind.
Queen Katie, there you go.
I can put a queen in there if you want a Yas queen. People insinuated that we weren't going to enjoy this conversation. I got to tell you, I'm already enjoying the shit out of it. So I don't
I've seen 3 minutes of one videos of you guys shitting on Contra. I can see why people would think we won't like each other.
Oh, okay.
Nice. I assume it was the recent Contra video.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad. So you did your research. That's awesome.
3 minutes.
I didn't do enough research. Speaking of ethical platforming, I do a shitty job. And because I didn't properly research, I'm not streaming this because I'm not sure.
Are you worried that you're going to be platforming inappropriate individuals on your stream? You think that Adam and 𝕬𝖎𝖏 might reach the qualification where you would not want to platform them?
I have heard they're memeing, and I've heard 𝕬𝖎𝖏 being very upset about trans people wanting to whine. And I'm a progressive, so I have
I know a video you're talking about.
Yeah.
Wick, what do you want me to put for you?
Just
political streamer or
Wick?
Put King.
I'm not a monarchist, unlike the authoritarian left. I believe in democracy. Okay, so I don't need any of those titles of monarchy. And
have you heard us debate the monarchists? We go.
I didn't hear you debate the monarchists. No, I have seen a little bit more of your content.
Us insane. Go ahead. What were you saying? I interrupted you.
No, it's fine. I've seen a little bit of your content, right? But much like Dat Katie, I have not done a lot of research. I prefer to come in blind, so to speak. I don't want to prime the pump. I don't want to get a preconceived notion of you guys, and I just want to.
Wick doesn't care about ethical platforms.
Well,
so he doesn't need to do research.
I do not feel right that they are in any way, shape, or form going to violate the ethics of my platforming. I might be wrong, but the chances of that are very, very small.
How would you feel that if you didn't look into it, Wick?
Well,
Because
see, when we go live, we should talk about this because I'm
Yeah,
curious
yeah,
as to
sorry.
what is like the criteria of like how bad does someone have to be to like not be ethically platformed.
Well, that's the whole crux of the discussion that I want to have.
Right.
So yeah, let's talk about this live.
Now, I didn't do any
I'm ready on
research
my end.
on either of you, but not for any high-minded ethical reasons. I'm just very lazy. So,
I mean, I saw you did see some of her panel where she was
well, I did see that one. Yeah, I
Right.
just saw the one panel that you and Destiny and President Sunday were on.
right.
So,
President Sunday's been
Ooh,
on the show before.
Prezi. Well, I guess that makes me feel better. Now I'm not worried.
well,
Shucks, I
Sunday's
should
been
have
on there.
streamed.
It's all good, right?
I trust Sunday's vetting pretty well, so yeah.
Okay.
Not so erudite's been on the show too. So
I don't trust her. No.
That's why I said it.
well, we've talked to
What?
Lance.
How do
We've
you
talked to Matt Binder. I mean, we've talked to a lot of lefties. It's not like
Yeah.
wait?
We talked to Big
wait.
Joel.
we've talked to Big Joel before.
Make him talk to me. I will. Okay,
Big
I was
Joel?
gonna say
We've tried to talk to him a second time and he hasn't replied. So I don't know if we can
I-
make him do anything.
I
we're in
assumed
response-
he wouldn't like you.
We're in
He
like
doesn't like us now.
like 4 levels deep in response videos too over the definition of woke. So
Yeah, that was fun.
I would be disappointed in Big Joel if he was willing to respond to you guys after like a first interaction.
Mhm.
Not in a mean way, just
Wow,
it doesn't seem like
hurtful.
something Big Joel would do.
he did like, was it 2? He did like 3 response videos to us.
yeah, he's
Right.
all over it.
Yeah.
They were very mean, and his audience was mean to us. So therefore, I
Oh.
don't.
We were
think
pretty mean to him, so whatever. Fair's
Wait.
fair,
We
right?
were. What are you
Adam.
talking about? We were angels.
Sure.
What's up?
Adam,
Yes, Katie.
why did you bring up Not So Erudite?
Because I knew that President Sunday made
She's a
like
woman and you're a woman and you all think alike.
No, that's very sexist of you. Not so erudite, because you said you like President Sunday, and President Sunday did a hit piece on Not So Erudite. So
I did not say I like him. I said I trust his vetting process. Let's
Okay,
not.
okay. Oh,
That's
okay.
true.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. So I knew that there was a chance that you didn't like her because of that. So
That's not why I don't get along with
I
Erudite.
rolled the dice. Is it because she's a little snooty? Is that why you don't get along with her?
Is she?
It's
I
because
know.
she's the wrong
I've
type
heard-
of feminist.
I've heard
the
some
answer.
people say she's a little snooty, but I think she's nice. I like her, obviously, but I like everyone, so I'm guilty in
Everyone?
that department. Everyone
Oh.
except Nick Fuentes.
So you like Hitler? Okay. Well, let me
Well,
tell you a
no,
story. Okay, let me tell you a little
actually-
story about Katie. Maybe this will prime the pump a little bit. So I made a tweet last night about how I like genuine people, and genuine people are pretty good.
Mhm.
Unironically, Katie comes in with, you know who else was genuine? Hitler, and she scolded me for a while.
Is that what you wrote, Wick? You wrote, I don't care if they're right, if they're wrong, if they're dumb, if they're smart. The most important thing is that they're genuine.
Yeah,
That's a
but
shitty thing to think, dude.
Hitler.
That's really dumb.
Boom.
Wick, let's check your audio really quick before
Okay.
we go live. There's a button in Zoom that you can check which audio device you have. It's a little muffled, so I
it's
don't
a little
know
muffled.
that it's acceptable, but if
I can adjust this. Where's this button? I'm looking for
so
it.
in the bottom left hand.
Oh, I'm
corner,
using the
it
right
says-
microphone. It says I'm using the
Okay.
Well, no, hold on. Here, is this better?
Oh
Yes.
my god.
Is this better?
Yes,
Ooh.
much
Okay,
better.
I thought you said a
sweet.
shitty mic.
Ooh.
Yeah,
I'm
no.
glad I
I
asked.
mean,
Katie,
fair,
Katie,
I
you
might,
sound
but-
great.
okay.
Yeah, so
Okay, so
Really?
we're going good.
much better. Yeah, I thought
I
it
feel
might be
like I'm
something
being
was
cut
going on.
out. I don't know.
No, you're not. It's not cutting
You
out at
sound
the end or
great.
anything.
Because my thing never lights up, so I get confused. Because I'm like, okay, is half the things I'm saying just not coming through? But maybe like it's a delay or something. I don't
I
fucking
don't know. I've everything.
You guys
comes in
sound great.
nice
No
and clear.
background noise. I'm ready when you are, Sitch. If you want to go.
Space.
Ready, Wick, for me to go live.
𝕵𝖎𝖎𝖙. Go.
Hey now, it's your boy PSA Sitch here with another Tuesday stream with everyone's favorite Doesn't like Hitler. Adam friended.
Wait. Hates Hitler. If he had
Okay.
a time machine, would kill baby Hitler, would abort Hitler in the womb, would have no compulsion about doing it. So
Yes, we're
Yes,
all
yeah.
pro-abortion here, pro-aborting baby Hitler.
yes.
So now that we've
yes.
been demonetized for this stream, do you want to introduce what's happening, Adam?
That's okay. Look, we're demonetized most of the time anyway. So we have a couple of guests here with us. We have WhickTV, who I put a link to his channel in the description so you can check it out. He does panels and whatnot. And we have 𝕵𝖎𝖙, who is our progressive celebrity on this show. She did a panel with was it a Wick panel that you were on? This was. Oh, and what was the topic of that panel? Was it platforming or was it? Oh, it was why do progressive lefties eat one another? That was the panel,
Adam.
correct? What?
Adam, I do a lot of panels.
Mhm.
So I think you mean what's the biggest harm to progressives today, wasn't it, Wick?
Yes.
The one that you
What
put
is the
with
greatest threat
stupid,
to
prompt?
progressivism
Yeah.
today?
Yeah.
Okay. But there was a little side quest in that panel where you guys talked about ethical platforming, which, we have a dog in this fight. We have a platform here. I mean, it's not a giant platform, but we don't want to be unethically platforming anyone. So I often think about, why is it some people can platform just about anyone they want and nobody gives them any flack for it whatsoever, and some people platform people and they get massive flack for it. And I just wanted to have a conversation about kind of what are the rules around platforming. I have put together some questions basically to get us going, but I'll let you guys introduce yourself a little bit before we go. Katie, we talked a little bit before the stream, but do you want to let people know like what you're all about?
Yeah, I think it's a very good example of like the topic that we're talking about, that Adam and Sitch are platforming Wick and linking his channel and promoting his streaming career and not mine. And I think this is misogyny. I think
I'm a
so, yeah.
sexist, so it would make sense that that's happening.
Yeah.
But we can fix that. I'll put a link to whatever platform you want in the description. So
I'll send it to you later. Yeah, I just stream on Twitch. I do politics stuff and crafting and hangout streams. So if you come and ask to see my tits, that's not the type of stuff I do. So just don't come. Like,
Well, good.
I mean, okay.
Glad you're upfront
What
with
I
it.
mean is, if you want to come. Just don't talk to me about it. It's weird.
Oh, God, nice.
So do you get a lot of people that are basically want you to be like sexual on your streams? Is that a problem on Twitch?
Yes. I have
Okay.
like a document of stuff that people write in chat and DMs that I get, which is just about people like soliciting stuff or asking me to take my clothes off or telling me to bend over or like asking to be my slaves or whatever the fuck. It's been interesting.
Wow.
I mean, we get a lot of
okay.
people that draw like gay art of us together.
I know we've got some of those people in our chat too, Katie.
I think we encourage it a little too much. Maybe that's the problem.
I know we usually show the art on the stream. So.
I mean, dude, if I got like drawings of like erotic art of me, I would show it on my stream. That's not what I get.
Okay.
Don't say that. Don't say that.
I get crazy.
Now there will be erotic art of you by the end of the stream. I guarantee.
I support art, okay? And whatever they draw of my tits and my pussy is gonna look better than what it is, right? So I have no issue with that, right?
Okay.
What I care about is the messages that's like I'm not interested in, it's like if I want you, I'll come get you, okay, boo? It's like I'm good. Like it's
There
fine.
you go, guys. You heard it straight here. If you want to woo a lady on the internet, don't say what's up. Just send her a tasteful nude you drew of her. It's very artistic. Or even if you can't draw, just get like an AI drawing to do it
The
for you.
The DiCaprio method, right?
I don't think
exactly.
it's the same.
Yes. Titanic.
So, Wick, you want to just
Sure.
give people your intro?
Sure. So first and foremost, if you want to come on my stream and see my tits for the right price, you absolutely can. That is absolutely a service I will provide for you if you give me enough money. Name is Wick. I go run a show called WhickTV, both on Twitch and YouTube. We do discussions where we talk about this subject a lot, like, and I have people that run the gamut from very, very far right to very, very far left on my show, cross ideological space, but that's what I do. So yeah, that's me, WhickTV.
I've heard you say that before, and we try to be like, we call ourselves enlightened centrists. It's a bit tongue in cheek, but we do try to fight tribalism. And that's one of the reasons why ethical platforming kind of comes up from time to time. I want to kind of look at it from the lens of unethical platforming, though, because I don't like, ethical platforming seems hard to define. I want to know when I'm, breaking the rules here. And Katie, you had a big problem with Destiny platforming 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙 without, this turning into a, Destiny is terrible stream. Let's say we platform 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙. What would be wrong with us having a conversation with 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙?
I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with it. The question is how you do it, right? So there are two elements to this. One is that I think depending on what a creator says that their goals are, I will have a different standard to what they're supposed to be doing. Like if somebody says, I'll platform anyone and I don't care, I'm not going to whine about who they platform. They've made it very clear that that's what they're doing. If someone says, I think I have a certain responsibility, I think this, or I think that, then I judge them differently. In terms of like platforming certain people, I think you can platform anyone as long as you do it responsibly, which is something Destiny believes in as well. It's just that when Destiny was platforming Fuentes and they were arguing and he was bootsing him in debates, that was all, that's good, that's great, keep doing more of that. Once it's starting being like, oh, Nick is impressive, let's just hang out at my house sometimes this one time and let's go get waffles together, then it's like not so responsible platforming as far as I'm concerned. So yeah.
So it's more of the friendliness. Wick, do you have a take on this?
Sure. I personally, think that if you are going to have someone on that is dangerous, let's say, that you, in whatever moral or ethical framework you work within, think, hey, this guy has some really bad or dangerous beliefs, and you bring them on, be prepared. If you are not prepared, that's a problem. I don't know if it's unethical, but it's just a mistake to do. You're going to hurt whatever cause you're trying to bring. It's not something you want to do. I differ from Katie, and I don't think that one has to... I don't think it's a bad thing to humanize other people. And I think that simply hanging around and being around even really bad people, it does humanize them, but I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. And so that's my stance on this. So I don't think that you can't have... There is no one I think that you can't have on, but it behooves you to be prepared when you do. That's all.
And that's just to respond, like if they have unsavory ideas that come up. What if no unsavory ideas come up on the stream?
I mean, it really depends on what you want to do. So say if I had 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙, I would drive the conversation to the points of contention where I thought I could be the most effective at pushing back. So I would do my best and attempt to drive the conversation towards his views on anti-Semitism or his views on nationalism and try to push back in that way. And I think, look, at the end of the day, it's not that deep. As long as you try and as long as you're at least somewhat prepared, even if you lose in that debate rhetorically, that does serve a purpose that can help you because other people can watch that later and see, oh, hey, this line of questioning or this line of argument doesn't work and we should probably try something else. So even in failures, I think that as long as you're trying, it's okay. Right.
So if he has those ideas, it's important that you address him. Is what it sounds like you're saying.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Wick, first of all, I didn't say that humanizing everyone is bad, but let's talk about neo-Nazis. That's a very easy example, right? Or like tankies. I'm fine throwing tankies in there.
Neo-Nazis.
Okay.
Neo-Nazis and tankies are kind of the same, so
but you're fine throwing tankies out of helicopters? Is that what you just said?
I'm fine throwing tankies wherever I throw the neo-Nazis, okay?
Okay. Nice. Okay.
I have certain boundaries, even for leftists. So yeah. I'm open to hearing the benefits of humanizing someone like Nick Fuentes. You said that you think it's not necessarily bad, but sell it to me.
Sure. I could do that real quick. So one of the problems with extremist movements, and one of the things that extremist movements themselves like to do, is to isolate themselves. What they do will, like, so for example, when the KKK marches, a lot of the times they'll put their kids first, so that the kids got a lot of hate, they get spit on, they get showed, and so they use this as a way to say, there is no other space for you. You have no other option but to be within our group. So when there are no off ramps, when they only have one path forward, it throws them. We toss these people aside. They are irredeemable, unsavable. You can't do anything with them. But if you are willing to see the humanity in a public manner of even someone as odious as Nick Fuentes, it does signal that, hey, maybe there is an off ramp that I can take. Maybe there is a place where I can actually get out of this and get back into society. Because a lot of times, I don't want to say a lot of times, but there are times when an extremist will think, I want out, but I don't think anyone's going to accept me, so I can't go anywhere else. So does that help explain?
It does help. I think you use the word humanize different than me. Right. I do agree that, like, speaking with compassion to, like, the audience is important. I don't think that, like, in a sphere when you're debating ideas, or when even you're having a cordial conversation about ideas, being kind of like, let me help you, Mr. Demagogue, who's earning a lot of money and has an entire career out of pushing neo-Nazi, for example. I don't think Nick Fuentes is coming over. So I wouldn't say, like, showing any type of, like, compassion towards Nick Fuentes is necessarily something that I'd see value in. But I think that someone who talks to Nick Fuentes needs to remember that they're also talking to his audience, and they need to drop those signs that, like, if you guys want to come around, will help you. So I do see value in that. I just think it's different than humanizing Nick Fuentes. But yeah.
Well, he is the spokesperson, right? He is the representative, right? And
yes,
the way you treat the representative signals to the group how you will treat them. So by treating Nick Fuentes that way, you signal to the group that you are willing to treat them that way.
Sitch, you want to respond?
No.
Okay.
I like not having to talk.
Well, we want to what you guys are talking about is perfect. Like, we want to moderate extremist views. It seems like that's what people are worried about. But my question is, I'm not sure. Like, there's a subset of YouTube that believes you can platform people with extremist views as long as you dunk on them, as long as you embarrass them to the world. Like, that seems to be the modus operandi for a lot of streamers. And I'm conflicted, because I understand that shows, some level of ethical platforming, I guess you'd say. But at the same time, I don't think that's an effective strategy for winning over their audience. Do you think, like, dunking on people helps moderate their views?
Wick?
Well,
you want to go first?
No, I'm with you. I don't think dunking helps.
Katie, you, in the very beginning, you said, listen, I didn't mind Destiny talking to Nick Fuentes as long as he's dunking on him, right? That's basically
no, not as long as he's dunking on him. They were having debates.
We're challenging him.
Yes. Like, whenever I talk to anyone from Destiny's community, their biggest, strongest, like, point about platforming Nick Fuentes was that watching Destiny absolutely demolish Nick Fuentes' ass in every debate. It's not just, Destiny doesn't just dunk in a debate. Destiny is very good at what he does. He's very smart. Like, he doesn't need to dunk on you to show how stupid your argument is. I'd argue that Destiny is in his debate tactics is a lot less dunky ish than a lot of other streamers. Destiny doesn't usually need to resort to, like, silly little, like, quips and shit like that. I mean, he enjoys it sometimes, but he really doesn't need it to dismantle an argument. He's pretty good at what he does. So yeah, I don't that I didn't mean dunking. I don't think
Mhm.
Destiny's
You
bread
said
and butter is
absolutely
dunking.
demolishes. I think. That's...
Well, you can
but my question
absolutely,
is,
yeah. Sorry.
is that an effective strategy to win people over from their audience? Ultimately, if you platform Nick Fuentes, you're saying, look, Nick Fuentes speaks to a bunch of extremists, and if I'm going to talk to him, I have an opportunity to win some of those extremists over to a more moderate position. People talk about this all the time. They say this happened, this happened to me. We'll get emails from people who or messages from people who would say, I was really much more extreme in my views. I started listening to you guys. You guys gave me better arguments, and now I'm a more moderate person. And thank you for that. So that's really what you're looking to do. But I'm not sure if you have a conversation with someone like Nick Fuentes and it's just like dunk fest, that you're going to.
Let's not use the word dunk. Let's
Right.
just say dismantle fest, right?
Okay, dismantle fest.
I guess I'm confused about how you think. Okay, first of all, you said something and I have to address it. I don't have an issue with extremism, okay? That's not my issue. My issue is with certain ideas that I think are harmful to society, okay? I advocate for very extreme revolutionary action, okay?
Oh my God.
I'm not gonna sit here and be like, oh, I fear extremes on both sides. No, I'm very much like very far on the left side of the spectrum.
Right.
I'm just fine. Extremism is needed, okay? Like, we've suffered long enough. I mean, not we, I'm very privileged, other people, but so I just needed to say that.
Well, that's
that
good.
Annoyed me.
Okay.
About the dunking, can you maybe very shortly explain to me how what you do is somehow different in its dunkiness than what Destiny or Vosh used to do during his debates? Because I saw you guys talk about Contra, and that seemed like a lot of dunking and whining that you are talking about. So you were whining. Adam wasn't whining.
Oh my
God.
Is this
before
a
the
dunk
stream
right
started,
now?
Katie
Are we
was
dunking right now?
Katie was so nice and funny before the stream, but now she's breaking my heart. She's going down a path I
you want to
can't
respond?
follow.
It sounds like she's calling you out here, Sitch.
Oh my God. Well, so wait. So
what
we
were
have to
the
define,
dunks that he was doing?
We have to. I guess. I mean, we're gonna get into Sitch's law here. What do we all mean by when we say dunking? Because when I hear dunking, what I think of is sort of like a dishonest way of kind of clipping someone out of context, or not really addressing the argument, or kind of being debate brained, and you're just kind of trying to look for some sort of like tactical, optical win, as opposed to actually addressing whatever the argument that they're making is. To me, that's what dunking.
Do you agree with that, Adam?
Do I? Of course, I'm contractually obligated to agree with virtually everything Sitch says. So. No, I mean,
okay.
no.
So do you think that's what Destiny did with Nick Fuentes?
Well, no,
I don't think so.
Not necessarily. I don't fully agree, because you can dunk on someone without there being any sort of dishonest component. Like you can basically do it stylistically and keep it completely honest, which I would argue. I mean, that's probably what you're saying we're doing with Contra. Like, I don't think we're being dishonest with Contra, but we are, making jokes, all kinds of, funny stuff. I mean, obviously.
Yes, it was very funny.
That could be.
Thank you.
Doesn't sound like that sounded sarcastic.
Take the compliment.
Can I give maybe an example of a dunk, what I would consider a dunk?
Sure.
Yes. So Katie, right? When I make a tweet about how, I really like genuine people.
So bitter.
Let me finish.
Oh my God.
You
he
are
fucking
so
dunked the
bitter.
shit out of you. He's so right.
So when I make a tweet on Twitter about, hey, I really most qualities, I value genuine the most out of most qualities, right? I don't care if you're wrong, right, smart, dumb. I want you to be genuine with me. And then someone, I won't name names, tweets,
Katie.
So, Hitler was very genuine.
Yeah.
That's a dunk, because it doesn't address the argument. It frames it in a wild, extreme way that has nothing to do with what is being talked about, and it dishonestly frames the narrative. That's a dunk. Ooh. That's an example.
Wick, do you think that's a dunk if later when we talked in DMs, I explained to you that I used an extreme example to show you how retarded your logic is?
Look, Look, I'm gonna have to change this progressive after you use the R slur
There
on my
you go.
stream, Katie. I don't think I can call you a progressive anymore.
I
No,
mean,
I-
slur
I'm just kidding. R slur.
you
R s-
virtue signaling progressive little snowflakes.
That was
Okay,
a
but so
joke,
wait.
Katie. I'm only playing. So, go
So
ahead,
wait,
Sis.
okay, so Wick, what is your response to this?
No, I see. This is kind of like the way they project or they deflect. I guess they swerve it, right? They
Yeah, who's
dunk
they?
on
They,
you.
Wick?
Okay?
Who's
You
they?
specifically, Katie.
White
The way
women?
Katie,
Oh,
women
okay.
in general. I'm not racist. I am misogynist. Okay, I am misogynist, but that's only because it's reality. We got to deal with that. Anyway, jokes aside. Okay, so when Katie, right, when you do these things and you make this dunk, and it was a dunk, even if you explain it later, especially in private where no one else can see it, right?
We can
it doesn't
release the
change the fact that
DMs
it's
if
a
you
dunk.
want.
Like this doesn't change what happened, right? It does clarify it, but it's still I would still, even with your explanation, I still feel it's a dishonest framing of things. I just do.
Okay, I'm sorry I hurt your feelings.
I'll be okay. I'll be okay.
Okay, good.
Well, Katie, you understand that, like, so when Wick had his tweet about, to him the most important thing is to be genuine. Like, a lot of times when people say things or tweet things, they don't mean them. I feel like you can take a lot of statements that are like we all understand, and if you kind of take them to their extremes, it obviously is not really what the person meant to say, right?
Yeah, I really enjoy doing that. It's
No,
really
but right,
funny.
but so you understand, like, that's not what Wick was saying in his tweet. He's not saying,
No,
like, oh, hey, good.
so people have this really annoying shallow quality when they would say empty generalities that make them feel good about themselves, and that's just
Wow.
like a pet peeve of mine that I find very annoying. I like substance in arguments, so like when it's just an empty like platitude,
Yo,
it's just kind of like
it was late night
boring.
on Twitter and I wanted to make a tweet. It wasn't that deep. I wasn't trying to make an argument or craft a statement or anything. I just wanted to tweet. That's all I wanted to do.
Wick, I'm completely aware that it wasn't deep. That was my point. It wasn't deep, okay? And I don't like it when people are shallow.
Wick,
Sorry.
Wick, how do you feel being a shallow, empty vessel of a human being?
You know what? It's just another Tuesday.
Hitler-loving,
okay?
shallow, empty vessel. Get it
I
right.
have to fill the
Sitch.
void with products from capitalism to sate my. So actually, Katie's probably promoting capitalism by making me turn to material and other objects in order to fill this void that she has created in my heart.
Wick, you are between enlightened centrists right now. There's nothing I can do to promote capitalism to any of you more than your brains have already you are so far past me, dude. Like I can do nothing for you. Also, let's use this public platform to delineate this. Obviously, my tweet hurt you a little bit. Can we just maybe you need to talk it over with me?
Wait.
Well, yeah,
Talk
let's not turn this into a therapy session. I do.
You're saying you want to talk about this in private. Okay.
I do want to continue on our path about ethical platforming.
Well, okay. So
yes.
before we went live, you said, Katie, that you weren't sure. You're not streaming yourself because you don't know enough about us, which is fine. That you didn't know if you wanted to platform us or not. So I asked, what is, like, to you when you make a decision, like, what is the point of this person, I'm not gonna platform?
Well, yeah, let's not.
How extreme do their views have to be?
To be very clear, I am a tiny 0 viewer Andy. Even if I platformed Nick Fuentes, it would be meaningless because my platform is so tiny and irrelevant. It has no bearing. So
well, it
even
could
if
though easily. Like if there was a viral moment that came out of it, if Nick dunked on you as a progressive and all of a sudden that went viral, that could be bad.
I'm sure you've seen all those Lances putting his foot in his mouth during Tim Pool's.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he's got no platform. Obviously, everyone hates him now.
I don't hate him, but okay. So here's a distinction that I'd like to make. It seems that for you guys, platforming is just collaborating with someone, and for me platforming is when you have a platform and you bring someone onto your platform, so you introduce them to your audience, you have them directly engage with your audience.
Interesting. Okay.
So maybe we should make that distinction, because I think you guys are just talking about like who am I allowed to collaborate with, which is not what I'm talking about when I'm saying platforming.
No, I meant it the way you meant it. Just having them
Okay.
on your platform. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Because like, for example, I do a lot of shit is like when I'm not on my platform, because I don't want to bring that into my platform. But like I went on Cozy and just shot the shit with just like my own like provoke Britney from like that's Britney, blah, blah, blah. And it was just like dunking on
𝕵𝖎𝖎?
Nazis, and it was fun. Yeah. What?
Britney 𝕍𝖎? Or
No,
which
politically provoked Britney.
Oh, okay. I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. I'd never
Cool.
do that on my platform though, because like I'd never like let my audience near those people. But like to just go on Cozy and it's just a bunch of neo-Nazis and like laughing at them, though, that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that very much. Yeah.
Right, but so like okay, so ethno-nationalists, right? You don't want to platform ethno-nationalists, right? But I'm assuming there's lesser views people can have that you wouldn't want to platform, like, you know, there's red pill, this, you know, and you said you know thought maybe we're anti-trans. I'm sure there's like a host of views that I'm curious as to where you draw the line.
Okay, so what I mean, again, I thought I made it clear. So it's not about someone's views that, like, for me, when I choose to platform someone, it's not about that. It's about, do I trust them to behave the way I need them to behave on my platform? So, for example, I platformed 𝕬𝖎, like, I think it was a few days ago or a week ago. And the only reason I agreed to do that is because prior to that, we had DMs and I said, this is what I won't let come up. And if it comes up, then the conversation is done. And I took a leap of faith, then the conversation is going to be in the confines that we agreed on. If I can't trust someone to keep my platform clean the way I want it clean, then they're not allowed on my platform. That's all that is to me. So it's like, it's not about the opinions. If I could trust Nick Fuentes to behave on my platform, I would. It's just, I can't control someone like Nick Fuentes.
Right.
So I wouldn't bring him on my platform. If I could, I would, you know?
Well, like what is behaving, like, you know, not saying slurs or, you know, specific topics you don't want to talk about or something?
Yeah, so like TOS is obvious because you don't want to get banned.
No N-words.
After that, there is like topics that you want to bring up. For example, I didn't want to talk to 𝕬𝖎 about the trans issue. It was very important for me. I did not want to get into that. So topics that you don't want to get into.
Is there anything you don't want to talk to us about?
Well, the topic is ethical platforming. I don't know how long that would last, but like I'm open. I am worried. I've seen some things, but we'll make it through.
Okay.
You remind me of 𝕵𝖎𝖎, and I like that. So
you like and don't like that, yes.
Yeah. What'd you say, Adam?
I don't know who 𝕵𝖎𝖎 is, but I mean, I still have a bunch of questions.
𝕵𝖎𝖎's cool. I like 𝕵𝖎𝖎.
Look, my question is like, what are we worried about? So if you're just saying, look, your platform, you want to run how you want to run it, it's not really a question of ethical platforming. I'm wondering, when you do something on your platform that other people are going to have a problem with, that other people are going to go, Katie, I can't believe you did this. You totally are an unethical platformer and I hate your guts now, right?
Yeah, so like at the end of the day, like for example, I had people who told me they're not happy that I'm coming to talk to you guys. I've had people that left my Discord.
Who are they?
Name them.
Names.
But I had a talk with 𝕵𝖎𝖎 and a bunch of people left my server for it. That's fine. Like they're allowed to do that. Yeah.
Oh yeah. How? Wait, I didn't see your talk with 𝕵𝖎𝖎. How'd that go?
I mean, I told him I thought he was a dishonest piece of shit in the very beginning of the conversation. So, I mean,
that's about how it went. Yeah.
It was all downhill from there. But I mean,
it was pre-manifesto and all that stuff. So,
yes,
Adam,
totally.
I guess I have a really boring answer to what you said. I don't really care what people are going to like disapprove of. Like, I try to be pretty responsible. I think maybe this will answer your question. I wasn't sure how you guys are going to have your rhetoric in
Mhm.
terms of like racial issues or like trans issues.
Mhm.
And there is some rhetoric I would not want on my platform.
Gotcha.
So, but that's my preference, right? And if
Sure.
somebody, for example, I say retard on my platform, if people don't like that, they can leave. That's not something that's going to change. If people in my chat say, hey, this bothers me, can you adjust it? I
Okay.
do. But if people are going to say, if you're saying that word, I'm not going to watch you, then I'm not for them.
May
Look,
I
I
this-
have
ask?
certain lines.
This puts you in a difficult spot though, because as political streamers, I think we want to win people over to our arguments. And if you're saying, look, I can't even talk about this issue because I don't want it on my platform, how am I going to win you over to my personal opinion, which I think is correct?
I don't think there are topics that I don't talk about. So I've had
Mhm.
I talked to a lot of transphobes. I've had a lot of conversations like that. I had some interesting racial conversation, a lot of gender and like
Okay,
feminism
okay.
related arguments. There are just certain rhetoric, especially regarding trans people, that I'm not happy about.
Right.
And that's because I am not trans, because I'm cis. I am more worried about that. Like if I talk to someone about like women's issues and they're being like super offensive, super misogynistic, like really shitty, I can endure that because it's like it's a personal thing for me. But if I'm now talking about trans issues for trans people, it kind of feels really gross to say, oh, me and my audience should endure this type of dehumanization for like the sake of bringing them over. And it's like, I don't feel comfortable exposing people to any level of dehumanization.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Okay.
You gonna say something? Wick?
Yeah.
Oh, I just had a small question. Maybe I'm confused. Maybe I'm missing it and things like that. But I understand that these are your preferences, Katie, and that's what you would do. But I don't know, when it comes to ethical platforming, I think that the question is, what would you look at someone else doing, and regardless
that's a
of
good
their
point.
preferences, say, hey, what you're doing is wrong and you need to stop because you're being unethical right now, right? So I get what your preferences are, and your platform's your platform, your house, your rules. But when it comes to, say, me, for example, let's use me as an example. Has there ever been someone I've had on that you said you absolutely should have not have this person on? Or is there anyone you can imagine I might have on that you would say you absolutely, under no circumstances, should platform this person?
I thought I answered it, but I guess it's like hard for people to pick up on. So like depending on what someone's values is, that's how I judge them. It's kind of like I judge people based on how hypocritical I think they are. So Wick, I see you as mostly like an entertainer. If you told me, hey, I'm here as a progressive advocate, I would judge you to a very different standard. A lot of people you platform, I would not allow, I would not be okay with you platforming, right? But as from the many conversations I've had with you publicly and privately, it seems like you have certain like things that you would put first. And according to those things, I'm just like, okay, I guess he's just doing his thing. I'm not going to judge. You have different values than me. I'm not going to get upset that you have different values. That doesn't make any sense to me.
We do that all the
how I
time.
engage.
No, this is weird. We do that all the time. I don't care what values
we?
someone has, it's different from me, right? I still think that there's certain things that you can do that, regardless of what you value or not, are ethically wrong. Female genital mutilation, ethically wrong, regardless of what values you have, right? Beating children, ethically wrong, regardless of what values you have. Like, these things are ethically wrong. I don't care what values or religion or cultural they are in. They are ethically wrong across the board, full stop, right?
Okay, so you want me to have that line of like threshold in regards to platforming?
No, I'm
I
trying
guess
to-
I don't think platforming is as bad as female mutilation. So
Okay.
like female genital
Fair
mutilation.
enough.
Well, that's good. That's definitely good.
I don't talk to me about. I'm gonna get in so much trouble. Don't. This topic is bad for me. Moving on from this, I have hot
Wait,
takes.
FTM
on
is a
this.
bad
So is that
topic?
in the
What?
situation of Destiny and 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙? I mean, that's, you got super angry. You did exactly how Wick described it. You looked at someone else and you said, listen, what you're doing is wrong and you should cease and desist immediately. Are you saying that that was because of the the hypocrisy of Destiny? What was hypocritical about what he was doing?
Yeah, so the thing that people don't get in what I criticize Destiny about is that, for example, a lot of people are mad at me that I say Destiny isn't a progressive. If Destiny is a progressive, his platforming of 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙 was harmful, and he should not have done that. If he doesn't give a fuck about progressive people or Jewish people or anti-Semitism, then he can do whatever he wants. But Destiny proclaims to have certain values, certain things that he cares about. It's like how I came on his platform and I was like, hey, here's this quote from you. It seems that you understand that hooking up with orbiters can put them in a very compromised place in terms of like them being able to consent. And so now I'm confused because before I didn't know you had this position, but now you do seem to recognize that there's an ethical issue with that. So how do you reconcile those two things? And before that, I couldn't come to him with complaints about that. But if someone says, here's my ethical line, and then they directly go against it, then that's an issue that I have no problem like calling out. If Destiny said, I don't give a fuck, I just want to talk to whoever I want to talk, I don't care about the consequences, fine. But that's not what he says. So he should do what he says.
What is the harm?
What is the harm of
Yeah,
what?
you said it did more harm than good. Yeah, obviously. I mean,
people to white nationalism would be the harm, right?
Well, okay, Sitch, what do you think the harm is?
Well, I assume the harm in these cases of platforming would be, people in your audience get turned into or get turned on to extreme views that you don't like as a platformee or the platformer. I mean, like if Destiny platforms 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙 and like 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙 turns a bunch of Destiny's audience into being white nationalists, right? That would be a harmful thing, I assume, right?
Right. But the question for me is that actually happening?
Well, yeah, but right. So that goes back into, sort of the question is you can platform. Well, my argument is like, I think you can platform whoever you want, but you would have to be prepared for the conversation. I think if you have a white nationalist on or someone has an extreme view on and you're not prepared so that they make you look foolish, to me, that would be sort of, from your perspective, that'd be unethical platforming because you basically just help them create a bunch of clips. It's kind of like, when I alluded earlier, like Lance, I think if you're on the left, I would say that Lance unethically platformed himself onto Tim Pool's show by just making himself look really bad, making the left look really bad, and giving Tim Pool a bunch of free clips.
Well, I question that just because there seems to be two movies going on Twitter.
Yeah, but one of them is Cope, and one of them is not.
Yeah, but the question is whether or not people move from one audience to another.
Sure.
Like if they're coping,
is whether people in your audience will move to the other audience. The second is because in our day and age, even if people like, I don't think anyone from the Lance's audience is going to go to Tim Pool, right? But all the clips that are circulating might get people that don't watch Tim Pool to start watching Tim Pool, right?
Right.
Well,
yeah.
There's also the question of handing the other side ammunition, right?
Right.
So
right.
you were Lance, for example, gave a look at it in these terms. I don't like looking in these terms, but let's use this framework. They are giving ammunition clips that the other side can use to people who are not Lance's audience, to normies, to people who aren't involved in the space, and they can use these clips going forward and say, hey, look what a fool this guy is. Like, look how we dumpstered him here. And someone who's not familiar with the situation, not really educated on the topic, can look at these things and say, hey, wow, yeah, that looks really foolish, right? Man, those lefties don't know what they're talking about. I guess this guy's pretty smart, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I feel like you didn't seem like you were happy with this, Katie, judging from your body language.
The data to know how many people transferred from Fuentes to Destiny and vice versa. Okay, we seemingly we don't have it.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. That'd be impossible to have, right?
The only real harm that I can point to in terms of that, again, very shortly, just to move on to the Lance thing, because it's more interesting, is that there's a very terrible, no, I don't think so. I actually think that the biggest clip of like the abortion thing is not Lance's fault. I think there's like something unresolved in the progressive movement in terms of what our advocacy should be in terms of abortion. in those third trimester cases. And I think Lance was in a position where he had to say something that felt very nonsensical. And everyone's like, he could have just said that when the baby is viable, just take it out. But saying it really takes away from the potency of the argument of like bodily autonomy triumphs all. And I don't think the progressive movement has reached a conclusion on what our messaging is there. And I think Lance was just caught between like not trying to sell out the party and trying to make a coherent answer, and it just looked really bad. But I don't think it's his fault. I think it's like our fault for not figuring out what our messaging is yet. So yeah, that's what I think about that.
That's very interesting. Do you think, because I didn't think about that, do you think that Lance had an answer, but he didn't want to give it because he wants to stay on point with the, quote unquote, progressive message?
I think when I was watching it with my audience on my stream, I was experiencing cognitive dissonance, and I noticed it because I was like, okay, our thing is bodily autonomy at all cases. On the other hand, I don't feel comfortable with putting down alive babies, right? But the concept of extraction means that if the woman refuses that, you are having to force her to go through a medical procedure. And the progressive movement needs to agree that we are fine with that prescription. And I don't think a lot of us are. And there's a discussion there that I don't think we've had yet. So I know that when I was trying to explain it to my audience, and when I was trying to explain why I actually am for extraction, and it was very hard, and I was very pissed about it because it felt icky to say, but I could feel it in myself. So I don't know if Lance had a different answer that he wanted to say, but I can imagine that if someone wants to like not break ranks, not because like some weird blind loyalism, but because it is really good ammunition for the pro-life side for us to give in on extraction at like late trimester.
Well, I mean,
it's
I don't think so.
really good ammunition.
Well, I'm not sure, because like, so Tim's point was, which first of all, I think there's an argument against this, because I mean, Tim's whole point on abortion is that he thinks if the baby, or the fetus, I should say, is viable, it should be, extracted and then incubated and, then put up for adoption. But to my knowledge, I don't think any state has any laws like that whatsoever.
I
so
mean,
I don't think
that
it would be, well, let me say, I don't think it'd be, like an optical win for Lance to just bring that up to say like, well, maybe in theory we could do something like that, because, that'd be fine. Just no one ever does that. Because the thing that I think made Lance look really bad is that, well, there's a lot of things, but one of the things that made Lance look really bad was that when he wouldn't, it felt like he was completely debate brain, because Tim is saying, well, if you perform an abortion on a woman, or you extract the fetus on the woman, both of these things are, you're putting instruments inside of a woman to get a baby out. Why are you saying that one of these violates her bodily autonomy and the other doesn't? And Lance didn't really seem to have an answer to that question.
I think, if I may, I disagree with your analysis. I do think that Lance was towing the line, and for this kind of tribal loyalty, and I think that was what made him look worst of all, is his refusal to even give an inch on what I think most people would say, yeah, at least saying, hey, I don't know the answer to this, right? I may not be sure what the proper thought is. I haven't given this much thought, but this idea that he has to toe the party line, that's what I got from watching this, that he felt like he had to be the face of progressivism. And I think it did him a disservice. I think
that space.
I think it made him look bad because he refused to even entertain anything outside of his bubble. That's what it looked like.
Can I respond?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go for it.
Okay. That's really dumb. Now that
Great
I'm
argument.
done with that.
Glad we got through that. Right.
I'm sorry. I just needed to like vent that. Now I'm gonna. So I get why you're saying that. I do. Also,
why
because
am
you're
I saying that?
Because
you're
you're
dumb.
centrist brain.
Yeah, you're dumb.
Okay.
That's what. That's it. That's the
No,
insinuation.
Wick is not dumb. He's just like he sees ghosts. Never mind. Okay, so
Mean, Katie. Please don't be mean to our guests.
You
Okay.
can be mean.
Please be
I consent.
meaner.
I consent to mean.
Nice.
Okay. Well, if he
Okay.
consents, obviously.
we are pro consent. Okay. I think that without me explaining why caving on what everyone wanted Lance to cave on, it wouldn't make a lot of sense, but I don't want to derail that completely. So just like try to imagine a reality where it does make sense to not give in on that point. Lance there was the representative of progressivism, of leftists. That's why everyone are mad at him. They're saying he did bad for the side he came to represent. Obviously, Lance had to represent. You're basically saying if Lance didn't want to look stupid, he
wait,
should have
what?
just thrown them under the bus.
Wait, no,
Like,
wait. See, I think this showcases a fundamental dissonance that we're having here and how we think about these things. He did not have to be the face of the party. He could have just gone on and been an honest actor and been a genuine, that word again that you don't like, a genuine person and represented his own damn self. Why can't he do that? Why can't he come on a show? I'm not here, for example, I'm not on this show to represent the party of centrists or whatever you think I am, right?
yes, you
He
don't
did
have
introduce
values
himself,
that you
though.
advocate for.
He did introduce himself as a leftist, though, Wick. He did come on.
Yeah, but doesn't mean that he
say,
has to have
have
every opinion that is, the standard leftist opinion, right?
Sure. And
No,
he didn't
he
have to
doesn't.
introduce himself as that, right? He didn't have to come in as that. He didn't have to, right? This idea that
But
he
he
had to is
did.
what I'm pushing back against.
No one said that he had to. He did that, and once he had done that, he had to act inside the line. If Lance wanted to be an independent player just coming in there being like, here are my own cool takes about shit, because I'm Lance and I'm cool, then fine, but that's not Lance.
That's kind of exactly what happened. Wait, so Katie, Lance coming in, you yourself said you had some kind of cognitive dissonance over this opinion. And we watched a panel in front of Congress, a congressional hearing, where it seemed people didn't really want to say that it was wrong for a woman to abort a child at the 9th month of pregnancy. So I mean, obviously that position you have a problem with.
Yes, I do. Just very quickly, I will answer that. People refuse to engage with the fact that Lance has made it very clear that most times when they terminate babies at 3rd trimester at 8 months and 9 months, it's not voluntary. Okay, Tim Pool had to come out of his ass with a hypothetical scenario that doesn't exist, that doesn't happen in reality, that is a non-issue, that he had to make up a law that didn't even exist to coerce Lance into making a nonsensical argument. Obviously, this is not a thing that is happening in reality where women go in 8 months and go like, actually, tell the motherfucker, I don't want it. That just doesn't happen.
Hold on. If Katie, if the only 9th month abortions are happening because it's the life of the mother is on the line, there is already an exception in place for abortion when the life of the mother is at stake. Why not make it illegal for situations where the life of the mother is not at stake?
Do you know that it's not legal?
Well, that's the question.
Well, no, so the question would be like, I think there's 6 or 7 states where that you can get an abortion with no restriction whatsoever. And so like the question would be for, I mean, I'm pro-choice, Adam's pro-choice. I don't know what Wick is. But I assume, what the counter argument is like, well, that seems weird that there's no restrictions. Most people think that there should be some restriction based on time and think that, whatever, whether it's 12 weeks, 16 weeks, 20 weeks, whatever. I mean, most people don't feel comfortable with a woman getting an abortion, in the last month or so, just for whatever reason. And if you say, well, that doesn't happen, it's just weird because it's like, on one hand, it's like, oh, that doesn't happen. But then if it doesn't happen, why is there a hesitancy to make it illegal anyway, right?
Okay, but we just agreed, if you're correct, that it is illegal in most cases. And just to make it very clear, I don't know why it wouldn't be already illegal. So I would want to read the justifications for what reasonings that were there.
a federal law.
It is legal in some states, and
It's legal in some
Lance seems to be
So it's
endorsing the
generally
position.
illegal. We
Yeah,
understand
but
this.
if
So why are
Lance,
we pretending like it is?
well, if Lance is
wait,
going
that
on
wasn't.
Tim Pool,
Wait. My question isn't. So there are 6 or 7 states, including DC, that it would be legal. But my question isn't that. My question is, like, even if you want to look at it from a purely optical perspective for like winning online arguments, it just seems weird to me that there won't be this. Well, even if it doesn't happen and no one agrees with it, then why not just agree to make it illegal? Like that's what kind of makes people think that there's some sort of hiding of power level or some sort of ulterior motive here.
So the reason I thought I answered this, I would want to read why they didn't make it illegal, because maybe there's an argument I'm unaware of that I'd be convinced by. And according to what I currently know, I don't know why that wouldn't be illegal.
Okay.
So unless I hear a convincing argument that I'm sure there are, or am I sure there are? I'm sure there are arguments. I'm not sure that I would be willing to come forth on them. Then I am completely fine. It's mostly legal anyway. I assumed there was a complete lie that it was legal anywhere. That seems ludicrous. The only thing that I'd like to say, sorry, Adam, that I'm taking your space.
That's okay. Go ahead. We'll finish up on this and we'll move back to the other thing.
Is that in terms of bodily autonomy, we need to understand that if a woman wants to do an abortion in 8 or 9 months, let's just run the hypothetical for a second, for any reason, and that's what she says, and you say, no, we can't kill the baby, we're doing an extraction instead, you need to understand that what's happening in that moment is that we are saying there's a baby inside you that we recognize is a human that we prioritize over your bodily autonomy, and we will coerce a medical procedure on you that you do not consent to. And
let's not cloud it with the vaccines yet. Go ahead.
We can,
finish.
But later.
And as a progressive, that feels really uncomfortable to say. I'm personally okay with that scenario. I would not be fine with forcing women to carry to term. So once it's viable, I would want an extraction. But I think we need to recognize that there's a huge violation of bodily autonomy in that case. And it can't be like, oh, just get it out. No, you're like forcing a surgery on a person who doesn't want it. It's like, I don't know if that's even precedent in any way.
Killing a viable baby, though, is of threatening bodily autonomy, too.
Yes, but then we have to talk about if it even has rights without being burned. Just let me complete the thought. So if we accept all of that, I think that leads a lot of credence to conservative arguments that we're saying, well, we're already pushing bodily autonomy here, and then they're going to want to push it before viability. Carry it until viability, and then we'll extract it. And when I think about that, that's horrifying to me. So I realized that when I see this ground of like extraction and viability, I'm potentially giving conservatives like, hey, we already kind of violated this woman's bodily autonomy. So why not a little bit more, and that's disturbing. I don't know if we have another more ethical option, unfortunately. That's my answer.
Well, I mean, there's 2 things, and I don't know which direction I want to go in because I feel like both of them lead to long pathways. The first would be, which was Tim's point, which is, a medical procedure to extract the baby and a medical procedure to abort the baby. How different are these procedures? And is one of them, a violation of bodily autonomy than the other one? I mean, that's kind of the first pathway. And the second pathway is kind of what Wick brought up, which is, do we really buy into, or maybe I should be, how do you feel about this ultimate bodily autonomy question? Because then it kind of gets into this weird realm of, does that mean that the government can have vaccine mandates for any reason? Does that mean that, the example Tim brought up, like that a woman should be able to do meth, when she's pregnant and no one can tell her otherwise, or, something that's dangerous to the baby just because she wants to?
Just real quick. So So I just want to put this out there, right? Like, I personally think it's okay to violate people's bodily autonomy under certain conditions, very fringe,
Sure.
very
Right.
small conditions. But I do not hold bodily autonomy as this thing that must never be, violated at all. I think
Right.
there are very good reasons to violate other people's body autonomy in certain cases, but they're
Sure.
very rare and they're very specific, and there is a danger in making it too broad, and so that is something that we do have to be
Of
aware
course. Of course.
So since we're kind of drifting into like an abortion debate here.
Well, I was curious about I mean, we don't have to go down the whole path, but I'm curious about because it sounds like you're saying, Katie, that there is this bodily autonomy argument and that it kind of has to be bought into by progressives, like from the most extreme end, which to me, I'm not sure why you would have to do that.
I would have to do that because my advocacy for pro-abortion comes from
Not pro-choice, pro-abortion.
Pro-abortion. I don't know the terminology, dude. Okay, pro-choice. Thank you. I will.
That's right. Okay.
Let's cover it.
Well,
okay.
You've kind of said, Katie. I mean, she said she doesn't want to give in here because she feels like it. Next thing you know, we're having a conversation about life at conception and bodily autonomy
so
at
like,
conception.
It's like a slippery slope. Like,
yeah, she is making a slippery slope argument.
I don't argue personhood. Like, I don't care about personhood. My argument for pro-choice is that bodily autonomy of the woman triumphs whether the fetus in 1 month is a human or is a person or not. Okay, so for me, if I give up on the bodily autonomy argument, I lose all of my argument. There's an inconsistency in my argument if I'm saying sometimes it's okay and sometimes it isn't.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. But then, so does that mean that you have to bite the bullet on all these more difficult positions about anti-vaccine and pro doing meth when you're pregnant?
No. So there's a very big difference between vaccine and between like doing stuff that are harmful to the baby when you're pregnant. There's a whole interesting discussion about like how responsible a woman is for the healthy of the baby and stuff like that. In terms of vaccine mandates, can you explain to me what exactly you mean by that? Do you mean by like grabbing people and injecting stuff to their body against their will? Is that what we're talking about? Because that doesn't happen.
Right. So it would be, well, it can happen depending on where you are in society, but
yes,
usually it means that the government says in order to do certain things, like go to public school or, leave and return to the country and get on an airplane or, or even a corporation could say this, not even the government, a company could say this, that you have to, get the COVID vaccine or, whatever other vaccine. And that would be a violation of bodily autonomy for the safety of other people, right?
Yeah. That's retarded. That's
you're against these sorts of mandates.
No.
Are you saying what I'm saying is retarded? Or are you saying that the mandates?
What you're saying is retarded.
Okay. Yes. Why is it retarded?
That's not a violation of bodily autonomy. Okay. A violation of bodily autonomy.
I'm so glad there's other people to take these shots for me. It's not just me this time. I'm glad.
I'll spread it out.
It's just like, that's why I rolled my eyes at WhickTV. It is, I don't know if it's, I don't want to bring, okay, I won't say it. I don't know what it is, but it is very weird that people think that being told you're not allowed to go on a plane, so you have to get vaccinated, is the same as like people not letting you choose what's growing in your body or potentially forcing a surgery on you. One is harming bodily autonomy. So when you actively operate on another human's body without their consent versus telling someone, like we do in capitalism, hey, if you want to not starve, you got to work. So unless we're going to say that that's a violation of bodily autonomy, I need you to stop with this nonsense. It's very upsetting and dumb.
So, okay, well, let me write down the capitalism thing because I want to get back to that. So let's just make sure that we're all using the same definition of the word bodily autonomy. So when I Google bodily autonomy, it says the right for a person to govern what happens to their body without external influence or coercion. But you don't agree with that definition, right?
So either that applies to everything that we do in life ever. So yeah, I guess I think the colloquial understanding, at least from what I use it, is when you physically infringe on someone's body. But if
So
we
you
want to
wouldn't
use
include coercion. You only include a physical, direct
coercion,
control.
physical coercion, yeah.
Right. But not like financial coercion or anything like that.
It's weird.
So like if
No.
the government, like just
Not to the
hypothetically,
same extent.
so like if
No.
the government said like, oh, you don't have to take the COVID vaccine, but you can't leave your house, you would say, well, they're not technically infringing on your bodily autonomy because, you know, you can just live in your house forever.
Yeah, that is the argument some people make. It's
Well, I'm asking, I know, but I think it's a bad argument. So I'm asking you if that's your argument.
me. I don't think it's the same as like the type of bodily autonomy argument we make for pro-choice, for example. So we can say that they're both infringement of bodily autonomy, for example, or that there's coercion. But when we start equivocating these things, when we're saying like we understand that there's degrees to saying
sure
you don't get to go to the cafe if you don't get a vaccine, versus putting someone in jail, versus performing a surgery that someone doesn't want on them. Like, and we can say all of that is violation of bodily autonomy, but to put that all in the same category is just like very reductionist.
No, wait, I agree completely with what you said. This is my problem. There are degrees to everything. And it's weird because I would put that in the degreeness of what you're talking about to the question of bodily autonomy in the first place. I think there's very few things. I'm sure someone could think of a couple. I think there's very few things, very few arguments that we would be comfortable with, you know, being driven to their most extreme, right? You know, I always said this, you know, people say they're free speech absolutists, and I say, no, you're not, because, you know, you're not in favor of, you know, CP and, you know, stealing people's work and slander being legal and all this other stuff. And so it's kind of the same thing with bodily autonomy. Like, I feel like you can make a bodily autonomy argument without saying, well, that, you know, I have to take it to the extreme version of like, until the baby comes out, you can, you know, kill it. And so to me, it's just a weird bullet that I don't understand why people on the left kind of bite that.
I think it's because we're worried about the slippery slope. And it's fine if you guys feel like it's a fallacy, but I think considering Roe v. Wade, I think we have good reasons to be concerned. It's really hard to engage in nuance when the other side has no interest in your nuance. Like, the other side wants one outcome. So it's very, okay, here's an interesting thing. I'm not going to name her, but she's a progressive advocate. And I told her that I think we need to completely stop like negotiating like third trimester stuff. We should just give it to them and just like get Roe v. Wade back, like first trimester, just get that like codified. And that's the only thing we need to focus on. Like, we can't keep dying on the third trimester hill. Like, it's not a large enough significant. And they're a very respectable progressive, and they told me if this doesn't come as a package deal, we're never going to get third trimester. Like, it's just not going to happen, and we're going to lose
They
this.
want to get third trimester abortions? That's the goal?
I mean, that's kind of slippery slope in the other direction, isn't it? Like, I feel like there's two different arguments, because I understand. So the argument that I thought you were making was the reason we have to defend bodily autonomy from this extreme level is because if we don't, then the right will keep chipping away at this forever, essentially. Like, we have to have this like complete absolutist position that we call standby, which I understand that argument. I don't agree with that argument. I think that actually hurts your case, because the way that I see a lot of these political arguments play out is that the left and the right will kind of take the most extreme argument on the other side, and then they'll paint the entire left and right, you know, their opponent with this broad brush of like, this person is this extreme. So like the right will say, oh my God, every single person on the left wants the baby guillotine, right? They want to be able to have, you know, the woman go up to Burger King and get an abortion when she's 9 months pregnant in the drive-through. And then, you know, the left will say kind of like, oh, every single person on the right wants it so that, you know, it doesn't matter if you get raped or, you know, whatever. It doesn't matter if the woman's about to die, they can't get an abortion. And to me, like on both sides, like when you have the right, there's like 17 or some 16 states that like basically have no you can't get an abortion unless you're dying. Like even if you're raped, you can't get an abortion, which I think is insane. But I feel like it doesn't, these sorts of positions, they don't lead the slippery slope. I think they just give the other side ammunition.
Yeah.
Because if you have these sort of like the openness to the 3-trimester abortion, then you are giving ammunition to the right to say these people are crazy.
That's actually the thing, though.
When we
it's not an openness.
Well, let me just finish. I'm almost done. But when we were streaming about, because we covered the entire Lance Tim Pool stream on Sunday, and a lot of people in our audience are pro-life, and they disagree with us being pro-choice. And a lot of people in our audience were saying, you know, I was more in favor of abortion until I saw the left position be, you should allow abortion up to 9 months. And that turned me off so much that I've gone into the extreme in the other direction. So I just feel like it's counterproductive.
Just to make it very clear, it's not about abortions for 3rd trimester. I don't know if people don't care much about it. But again, when we're talking about extraction in 3rd trimester, if a woman doesn't want that, that is a coerced medical procedure on a human being that does not consent to it. And progressives just need to decide if they're okay with that. It's fine that centrists and conservatives say that's a small price to pay for the life of a baby. I think when it's women paying that price, that's a lot easier to say. But maybe we'll reach that conclusion too. You know.
I mean, it's just weird to say. Obviously, they have a baby in them, so they're going to be paying the price one way or another. It's not like, I mean, I would argue we're talking about the various extremes. I mean, if you're talking about vaccinations, you're talking about some untested vaccination. Like, we know the abortion procedure quite well and have a long history of knowing the side effects and potential outcomes. We don't know those with a vaccination.
If you do a C-section to extract a baby at 3rd trimester, you know women die from C-sections, right?
Sure, totally. But we know the likelihood of that happening. In the case of vaccinations, we don't know the long-term effects of vaccination, so we have no idea what the likelihood of any sort of bad outcomes are.
I'm not going to talk about the validity of vaccination.
The vaccination stuff, we do have a good idea of the long-term effects.
Well, let's this is like way off the beaten path anyway, but I'm just, look, I'm saying you can make arguments on both sides for which is going to be the most extreme. Okay. Can we go back? Sitch, are you done with abortion, or like we keep slipping into abortion debates?
Sure. Well, I mean, it was.
Adam, it's interesting. Come on, listen up.
It's more interesting than ethical platform.
If I may,
is it? I mean, I don't.
It's so.
I want to try to tie these things together, if I may. Right?
Can I go pee while you do that?
You go.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
We have a history of understanding various vaccines, but this vaccine is a completely different technology. So I don't understand.
I'm not prepared to have a vaccine debate with you right now.
Okay,
so I can't
okay,
really do
good.
that, unfortunately.
Well, it sounded like
talk about things I don't know. Like
it sounded like you were. So
I do know. I have done this before. I just don't have all my ducks in a row to present the evidence to you at the moment.
Right.
But if you want to do that at a later time, we absolutely.
No, I don't. I'm not. I'm totally not interested in vaccines. I'm just saying, obviously, there are unknowns in both cases, and I would argue that in the abortion case, the unknowns are far fewer. That was the only point that I wanted to make.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I think that one of the problems we're going to have in any of these topics comes to a lot of the ways that I think a lot of people, not just Katie, but a lot of people on both sides frame these things. This idea that if we give any ground to the other side, quote unquote, that they want what they want. And you heard Katie earlier say this, like, we know what they want. They're not going to stop. They're going to keep going until they get what they want. There will be no compromise. There can be no compromise. They are the enemy and we have to fight them. I think that is going to frame every conversation, whether it be platforming, whether it be abortion, whether it be vaccines, whether it be any issue we can think of. This mindset that people have, and it's a lot of people, right? It's not just on one side or the other. A lot of people on all sides of the aisle have this mindset that if we give any ground to the other side, that they, as the dishonest actors they are going to run with it. And I think this is why this talk, when I talked earlier about humanization, right? That's why I focus on that, because we have to stop seeing everyone that doesn't agree with us as an enemy to be fought, and we need to see them as a human to be talked to and conversed with. We have to be willing to give something up to get something else. Compromise is a good thing. It's a function. It's a feature, not a bug. And I'm just, this whole conversation has been frustrating to me to no end, because we cannot seem to, it's this framing of this like this. I don't know. I'm sorry for ranting, but that's just my...
No, it's
No,
okay.
I-
All except for Hitler. Okay, I'm going to draw the line at Hitler.
Just with Ellen Hitler. But no, I mean, I agree with you completely, Wick, and I think that's why you are a centrist.
I'm
And
not a
that's why we're
centrist.
enlightened
People keep
centrists.
saying this.
Okay,
I'm
so
not
you're
a centrist.
just a smart person.
Centrist
Okay.
is a team in of itself. Okay, I'm not on a
Oh,
team.
wait. Centrist is a compliment. You're more is like
There you go.
when I
What-
say centrist, I'm being very nice.
What do
I
you want to
don't-
call me? Besides
Stupid.
retard.
Shallow. And imbecile.
An enabler, a liberal.
enabler?
I don't know.
Oh, dirty liberal. Oh, so awful.
Okay.
But well, okay. Regardless of labels, no, but I agree exactly what you're saying, Wick. 100%. I do think that is part of what's polarizing everyone, tearing the country apart. And I think it is. I think that attitude only serves the extremists entirely. I don't think it serves us moving forward in any sort of function in this country where we can all get along and keep getting along with each other. So
Yeah, it gives us a great choice. It gives us no abortion, even in the exception, even in the case of rape and incest, or abortion up to the minute
Moment of
before
birth.
birth.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
It's
Those
fascinating
don't
that
seem
you
like
can
two
continue with that
options.
framing, even though you realize that's illegal in most countries.
Those
And
are
yet
the
you-
two options on the table, though, as
no,
a
it's
voter
legal
right
in
they're
now.
6 states.
But they're
Yes, they
not.
are. The Republicans are offering zero abortion, even in the case of rape and incest, and the progressives are offering abortion on demand up until the minute of conception, or up until the minute of birth.
Do you deny, Kate, that there are... I could find you them right now. I could pull up their... You know who they are. You've talked to them
Those
before.
are the two
People
options.
who use things like "yeetus the fetus," right? They use these phrases that they basically say they don't just say abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. They say, I want abortions on demand. They really lean into it in order to try to get... and the thinking is, we want to normalize abortion so that people can have just abortions on demand. They do this. This is a rhetoric that happens, and like to act as if it doesn't happen, I think just shows like this either unwillingness to see or just ignorance of... It might be a large voice, but even if it's just a small voice, it's worth pushing back against. There's not a lot of white nationalists out there. They're small, but we push back against it for very good reason, because even though they're a small voice, we want to shut it down, nip it in the bud. An ounce of prevention is worth about a cure.
You've been
And
trying
Lance
to
is on
shut
Tim
down white
Pool.
nationalism for a long fucking time, and it's on the rise. So clearly the centrists have been doing it not very well, have they? They're
Well,
too
it's not-
focused
it's-
on the tiny little whiny voices on the left that are saying things that are mostly illegal. That's the problem with centrists too.
Mhm.
Like
Not a centrist.
they keep.
It's okay. We are. So tell us. Tell us
Go
the
ahead.
problem.
Yeah. What's
It's
your beef?
really my beef is that doing the whole like, oh, compromise is just a part of life. We just all want to be happy together. Why you gotta rock the boat?
That was a
It's
great
very-
Bubbles impression, by the way.
Thank you. Is great when you are not oppressed, not marginalized, not suffering from certain issues. It's called privilege. And usually centrists are pretty fucking privileged. It's
Well, I'm not
because-
privileged in the abortion debate because I have two unreasonable positions to choose from. I don't feel very privileged.
Aw, that must be so scary to you when you get
It
pregnant,
is.
doesn't it?
Well, I have obviously
Did you just
females
assume
in my
Adam's
life.
gender?
Yeah. Well, I do. I have, females in my life that I do worry about. Obviously, I'm not just exclusively focused on the male population. So,
That's good to hear.
yeah.
So can
Centrists are privileged.
I need to drill this down. So in most states, it is illegal to do the second option. But you are upset that progressives can't say in the 7 states that it is legal for whatever reason, we will not stand for it. Stop it immediately.
No, I'm upset that there's not a look. I'm upset that there's not a reasonable option for voters. Like, let's make abortion legal up until a certain point. Like the viability standard, I think, is a reasonable standard.
So I don't know what Joe Biden's position was when he ran in 2020 on abortion. So I don't know that. But if in 2024 rolls around, my guess would be he's going to take a very vague position where he's not going to exactly say whether he's going to give an argument about bodily autonomy for the woman. He's going to say it's a woman's right to choose, and he's not going to specify whether he's in favor of any sort of ban or not. That'd be my guess, right?
Yeah,
because he doesn't want to alienate either side of the conversation. So
yeah, so it genuinely sounds like your gripe is with the American political system more than any of like it's true, 2 parties.
Well, no, my gripe was specifically with you for calling me privileged when I can't even have access to a reasonable abortion debate. It's like,
what do you mean?
How is that privilege?
To a reasonable abortion debate?
Look, the framing of the issue right now is either you don't accept, like you're pro-life to the point of rape and incest is just fine, or you're pro-choice to the point where if a woman wants to have a child sacrifice at the 9th month and, you know, is a Satan worshiper, she can do it as long as the baby is inside her womb.
Okay.
Those don't seem like reasonable positions.
Okay. And that framing is what, from our conversation? Because that's certainly not what.
No, that's the framing I see just out in the world.
Well, it's from if we have to accept the ultimate bodily autonomy position, right?
Yes.
Yes. So if I say very early on that there is like an unresolved issue in the progressive movements regarding that.
And I was happy to hear you say that, Katie. Yes. I do. Yeah.
I'm fine with critiques. I think critiques are good. It's just a lot of the times when centrists whine about the left, they seem to whine about an aesthetic that they don't like. Why do you virtue signal? Why do you gatekeep?
Hold on.
Why do you do stuff that I'm annoyed with?
You said earlier on you were in favor of substance, okay? What I am talking about has nothing to do with aesthetic. I'm talking about putting a date on the calendar when abortion is no longer legal. Like, is it 12 weeks? Is it 15 weeks? Is it 24 weeks?
Okay, so
that's
I'm asking you.
That's not aesthetic.
I agree with you. I'm asking you, what do you need progressives to do to further what you want?
Well, I mean, just agree.
Put the date on the calendar.
Put the date on the calendar. Stop whining about bodily autonomy and the woman should be able to have abortions at 9 months. You're the one whining about women's bodily autonomy, not me.
Yes, I do fear for women's bodily autonomy. That is true.
Yeah, I fear for everyone's bodily autonomy. And I feel like a baby at 9 months, there's a good argument to be made that they should be entitled to some kind of bodily autonomy. They're literally in there sucking their thumb.
Yes, but you also compare that to vaccine mandates, so it's hard for me to really.
WhickTV did that. That was the WhickTV's fault. Like,
I did it too.
Way to like throw me under the bus. No,
I'll take some blame.
If it comes down to like bodily autonomy, this is a question. Like, as a concept, right? As a conceptual thing, you're right. Progressivism has to decide. Well, I guess progressivism has.
What is the position going to be that's reasonable that people will vote for?
Okay, so you don't just want a date. You want a date that you want. Okay, so tell me what you want.
Well, look, I would like a reasonable position that we could move past the abortion debate happening. Like, obviously, there are going to be extremists on both sides that are going to be crying and whining. But I feel like the majority of the population would like just abortion to be legal in the first trimester. And then after that, no more abortion. Like, except in the case of the mother's life is on the line, which I think obviously those exceptions are needed. Like if there is some catastrophe that takes place, and this is what Lance was talking about on Tim Pool, if some catastrophe takes place in the 8th or 9th month and the baby needs to be aborted to save the life of the mother, there are already exceptions in place for those things. And this is why he's trying to push a position on Tim Pool that he doesn't hold, because Tim Pool already knows those exceptions are in place. And he's saying, you know, if the Satan worshiper mom that wants to sacrifice the baby doesn't need any exception, then there's really nothing we can do.
Okay. So let's talk about, you said after first trimester, no abortion unless it's necessary. But a lot of late term abortions, so like not third trimester, but second trimester, happen when women, for example, realize they're not going to get the financial support that they need, or that their partner is not going to be there for them. So late abortions happen. So you'd be against that.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, yeah.
Second trimester is not viable. Now what?
Look, you're in a weird situation where you're weighing like the financial situation of the woman against something that's become a human being. It's like, you don't, what if a woman has a child and then all of a sudden loses her job and now her financial state has completely changed? Should she be allowed to just
obviously,
take, like, sorry, kid, it was a good go?
First of all, yes, people give their children to adoption. Second of all, we talked about viability. Viability is at 6 months. There's 4th and 5th trimester, which is late abortions, which are not viable. So what do we do then?
Well, I just, look, I don't know. My position is somewhere around the first trimester, like 15 weeks, 12 weeks. I mean, whatever you want to do. Like if you want to go 20 weeks, I think it's a little, I mean, conservatively, you're getting, Sitch, when do they say consciousness comes into being? Like around 10 to 12 weeks, or 10 to 18 weeks?
It was like 18, 20 or something. 18
to 20 weeks. So like after 18 to 20 weeks, you're talking about, you know, a potentially conscious being.
Yes. So here's the thing, right? And this is why I'm being pushed to the extreme position that I am. Because now we're not discussing third trimester. You were like, hey, stop being so extreme about this. 9 months abortions are crazy. And now we're discussing how you don't want second trimester abortions because there's actually a person there. And this is exactly what I said will happen once we start entertaining this.
No,
we're deliberating.
No.
A non-viable fetus.
Katie. That's not fair, Katie. Because you set up a hypothetical of some hypothetical conservative that doesn't believe, you know, they believe life begins at conception and it's a baby at conception and no baby should be aborted for any reason whatsoever. And they're proposing to you, oh yeah, let's draw a reasonable line at the first trimester, when really they want some more extreme position. I want the position I'm advocating for, and I'm like, let's just be done with this whole abortion debate.
Yes. And I'm saying that the position that you're advocating for is you don't want abortions in second trimester when it's not viable, and you're talking about personhood.
Okay.
So
I gotta jump.
I'm asking you what your position is.
My position is kind of personhood. So, but go ahead.
I think that there is a danger to putting restrictions on even very late abortions, and that danger is how these restrictions and things look, how it works out when boots are on the ground, when the rubber meets the road. So a situation, for example, you have a state where there are legal exceptions for the health of the mother in very, very late abortions. The doctor has to make a calculation. An emergency comes in. Is it life-threatening enough to qualify for these exceptions, or what I'm about to do illegal? There is a time limit on this decision that has to be made, and they have to weigh the life of the mother and the health of the baby versus, is this going to be something that gets me in trouble with the law? And that does put an onus on the doctor. That does present a danger to putting on restrictions in even late-term abortions. That's the proper argument.
There are dangers in all kinds of professions. Obviously, police officers have a bunch of dangers.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
we try to
mitigate it
mitigate
as
it.
much as possible.
We try to mitigate it with the law, but the way
Yeah.
to mitigate it is not to make it completely legal to do anything.
Certainly,
Obviously.
No, but, like,
certainly. But
there
again,
Mhm.
I'm just saying you have to be aware of what restrictions you're putting onto place. Just saying we should have exceptions for the
understand that,
health of the
yes.
mother in the late claim, I don't think is enough. I first of all, my position, I am pro-choice, but abortion deeply disturbs me. I,
Mhm.
for myself, would never choose to engage in it, but I'm not everyone else. I think everyone else can make their own decision, right? For me, it's not a route I'd take, but for other people, have at it. But again, for even the late term stuff, you have to realize any restrictions going to be put into place. You have to be cognizant of what those restrictions are, or what those ways are, those exceptions, that's the word, those exceptions are, because unless those exceptions are broad enough, you're going to run into a lot of more trouble than you probably could take.
Mhm.
Yeah.
No, I agree with the practical concerns that you're talking about, Wick. I mean, we talked about, I bring this up always, we talked about there's some horrible case where this woman was like slowly going blind, and I don't know what exactly was causing this, but something about her pregnancy was slowly making her go blind. And it was some sort of autoimmune thing that the baby was causing to her own immune system to attack her optic nerves or something. And it was like, even though she should have been able to get an abortion under the law, it was so difficult because whatever state she was in, all the doctors were just so concerned about whether this would satisfy the law. Exactly. No one wants to perform the abortion. And so I think that is a real concern. I mean, it'd be really bad in Texas, where they have that really wacky law where like a third party can sue a doctor or a woman for getting an abortion that was not deemed legal. So I agree completely with that. But I think kind of what I'm hearing here, like what the base foundational belief difference is, I think, between at least me and Katie, and I think Adam agrees. I don't know how Wick feels about this, is that I think in my mind, the way that I see it is that extreme positions beget more extreme positions. They don't
Yeah.
provide shielding
You
for, well, let me just finish. They don't provide shielding for more moderate positions. So what I mean by this is like, you said earlier, oh, the centrists have been trying to get rid of white nationalists and they haven't gone away. So there's a failure there. But from my perception, I remember growing up on the internet in the 90s and the 2000s, and it felt like there was kind of a general consensus of moderate liberal view on the internet. It didn't, there was like edgy racism, of course, but it definitely was significantly less than by today's standards. We didn't see it actual, ethno-nationalism and movements like this kind of cropping up on the internet, back in those days, to the extent that we're seeing them now. We didn't see the kind of anti-Semitism that we're seeing now. And to me, all this stuff, I start seeing it all starts, 2014, 2016, as soon as all like kind of the woke stuff kind of starts to rear its head. And to me, and when I hear these people talk, they point to the extremeness of wokeness and they say, and that's like their number one selling point. They say, look at all these people with these extreme, crazy left-wing views. You need to fight back against them, become an ethno-nationalist, become a Nazi. And so to me, it's just, that's what I see. I see the pendulum effect happening, and I see that the moderate positions actually prevent these extreme positions from taking hold. I feel like you have a foundational belief where you think it's the other way around.
There's a term for this. It's called reciprocal radicalization, where both sides radicalize the other to more and more extreme positions in order to fight the other. That I just wanted to throw that in there.
That's a great another term for it. What is it? For the privileged, equality feels like oppression? Is that what it is? Yeah. I don't doubt that a bunch of whiny 16-year-olds that now are having to re-examine their, or 30-year-olds or 40-year-olds, people who became neo-Nazis because suddenly Black people were like upset again, those uppity, annoying ones. Yeah. If that's what extremism does to you, you will never reach any liberation for any oppressed minority. But no.
Okay, continue. If you're gonna.
You guys, you keep doing the thing, and I let you do the framing of like, oh, extremes are just causing extremes. Like, why can't we talk about the nuance? Let's fucking talk about the nuance, Adam. I am willing to give up third trimester abortion if you're willing to give up second trimester abortion.
Second trimester abortion. I mean,
Let women get second trimester abortion until viability, and I will allow for extraction after viability. Can
What
we
is-
agree on that?
what I mean, that would be. I mean, I've drawn a line at consciousness for my position. So I mean, it would be that would force me to be okay with aborting what are
When
basically
does second
conscious
trimester
babies
end?
for any reason whatsoever. And I don't like that's not really a tenable position. Why is, I guess, bodily autonomy is your reason why you think it's okay to abort a conscious baby at 8
No,
months? or-
okay. If you think you know what consciousness is, great for you.
Mhm.
I don't know why would someone ever have the vanity to be able to conceptualize what consciousness is or how we determine it in the womb. Like we can't even like determine what it is with like adults speaking
Well,
that
wait-
are
wait
like
a second.
breathing. So
Like
Based
if
off of
you're
brain structure.
if you're
Yeah.
undergoing surgery, and I don't know if you've ever had a surgery or anything, but they give you anesthesia and you're basically just unconscious. Like you it's like 1 minute you're there, the next you're like in the recovery room, right?
Mhm.
That I'm under the impression is not the experience for a fetus. In the second trimester and third trimester, the fetus is having like a conscious experience. They're sleeping, they're awake, they're experiencing life in some way, shape, or form, which is just, I mean, that's far different than turning off the ventilator on some vegetable.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. So do you feel like turning off things on like the ventilators on
mind
vegetables is fine?
I don't mind
Okay.
turning. Look, but they're not conscious. They're not conscious. They're not
Okay, I'm
having a
just making
conscious
sure
experience.
that's
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, wait,
So,
Adam.
but that is my reasoning for coming up with a certain cutoff date. But you're asking to go beyond that cutoff date because of
No,
women's bodily
okay.
autonomy. Like if
No.
there's a situation where the mother's life is at stake against the baby's consciousness, like I'm gonna go with the mother, obviously. Like she's her health, her ability to see, I would default to in every circumstance. But these exceptions are already built into the laws.
My frustration comes from the fact that the entire framing was about like, oh, why do we have to have two extremes? Like, why are you insisting on third trimester abortion? And I said, because people are always trying to weasel their own little shitty things in there. So I have to stand fast. And here we are, where you actually have a different line, consciousness, which you didn't even bring up.
Mhm.
Until now, when
Well,
I said
it wasn't a
fine.
secret. I mean, you could have asked me, what is your
Oh my fucking
Well,
god.
no.
That
So
is-
okay, stop. So now I'm frustrated with you, Adam, because she did offer a compromise, right? Say, okay, I'll give up some of what I value, and you give up some of what you value. It's not a compromise if you don't give anything
Look,
up.
it's not.
So why-
if I have to give up my integrity, it's
But
not
if-
a compromise I'm willing to take. Okay.
Well, Adam. Well, no, I want to
shit.
challenge you on this.
Integrity.
Stop. I want to challenge you on this. Okay?
Shit.
So if you had a choice before you had options, okay, and one of the options was you get nothing. You get nothing at all, nothing
nothing.
whatsoever that you want. But the other option is you don't get everything you want. You don't get to stop him all after consciousness.
Look,
but you
if
do
it's-
get to stop some of it.
If
Why?
it's up to,
Why
if
would
it's
you
up-
choose?
Look, if
the
it's
nothing?
between, I didn't say I wouldn't. Look, I didn't
knows
say I
he's
wouldn't
going
choose
to
nothing.
win because the
No,
extreme
wait,
extreme
wait.
of
I let
progressive-
It's
Adam
unfair.
answer.
Totally unfair. Totally unfair.
Mm.
Like if this was on the ballot and we're taking third trimester off the table and we're going to make an abortion law where abortion is illegal after the second trimester, I would vote for that.
Okay,
obviously,
that's compromise.
because that is the most reasonable position out there.
Okay.
And I'm a pragmatist. Obviously, I'm like that would be a more reasonable position than anybody else has put on the table.
If you had to choose between the two scenarios, you would choose the compromise position.
Of course, yeah.
Right. But I think that's the way it should be. I mean, everyone has to be, everyone has to give up a little bit to feel comfortable, right?
Exactly. Like
what
with
compromise
guns
is.
and things. Like if we're going to want like the people who want all the guns off the street and the people who want like to be able to just carry guns into nurseries
Right.
and like
Sure.
government buildings, there has to be kind of this reasonable compromise. And I think it's a feature, not a bug, where we both sides leave thinking they gave up, they violated their integrity a little bit,
I don't.
because
That's
the
not a
option,
good.
the other option is just
Mhm.
getting nothing, right?
That
Yeah.
that framing is awful.
I wouldn't use those
The framing
words.
is
I wouldn't say violate your integrity, but I agree with everything you're saying.
Like,
I'm
oh, man.
not very optically minded. So
Yeah, I
excuse me,
understand. I
but you
understand.
understand the concept.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
But okay. So I don't know. I kind of want to go back, and I feel like maybe we've done with the abortion stuff. I do want to go back to the centrist are privileged thing that you said, Katie, because I feel like when I have this conversation with people that are, you know, the anti-centrist position, I do hear a lot of kind of the same thing that what you're saying, like, oh, you know, this is you're speaking from privilege. You know, freedom is never easy, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the way that I look at it is, like, if we were to go back in time, civil rights movement, you know, in the South, Black people literally treated like second-class citizens, don't have equal rights. You know, you can make an argument that I might even agree with, where I'd say, you know, yeah, it could be moral for Black people to, like, you know, destroy a government building in the South where they literally don't have rights, you know, in some, you know, really horrific fashion that I disagree with, you know. But just because I think that the action is moral doesn't mean I think it's going to necessarily be helpful to their cause. I do think that with the civil rights movement, so much of what was helpful to the cause was the fact that there was a lot of saying we need to be, not everyone, but there was a lot of we need to be nonviolent. You know, we need to go out there and, unfortunately, basically sacrifice and paint this picture of, like, we're out here in suits and ties trying to sit at a counter, and here's a fucking racist white guy with, you know, baton or a fire hose or a dog attacking me. And it's not
Yes.
fair. That's not a fair thing that happens. It's not a fair thing. But I'm just being kind of like practical in terms of how to get people on your side. Sometimes you just have to do that. And I just feel like the idea that, oh, well, that's, you know, that's privileged position. I feel like that's an argument of emotion turned towards the unfairness of the situation, as opposed to a practical argument about what's going to actually materialize the change in the world that you want.
Yeah. I think that liberation and like the relieving of marginalized groups, like conditions, would instantly be improved if mostly centrists and liberals stopped worrying about all the other normies who need to be brought up to the other side. It seems like mostly centrists and liberals, like, yes, the cause, like, I'm totally down with that. Yes, I got you. But also the way you're going about this, it's kind of like, and it's gonna scare off all the other people. Just do it differently. And it seems like all of them are like
Katie,
that.
Katie,
Shut up.
Do you think?
Shut up. Shut up.
Think
Let me finish. Shut up.
ends justify the
Shut up.
means?
Shut up.
Can you do literally anything
up.
to get what you want?
Shut up.
Good question.
It is. Now I'm gonna finish talking.
We'll ask you. Go ahead, finish, Katie.
Yeah. So I think if centrists were less worried about, like, trying to get marginalized groups to behave better and just, like, use their power and their privilege and their political power to just push for better treatments of those groups instead of whining about the optics of those groups, that would cause actual change. But centrists mostly want to whine that they don't like how oppressed minorities talk to them, and it really hurts their fifis.
Right.
And that's
So,
okay.
I think there's some I've heard what you're saying a lot, and I think there's kind of a misunderstanding of the situation, which is that when a centrist like myself or Adam, you know, says something like what we just said to you, we're not the majority. We're a tiny minority of people. And what we're saying is, listen, you know, I would still, if I'm in the 1960s, you know, and Black people burned down a police station, I would still vote in favor of civil rights. It's not going to change my mind. But I'm aware that a lot of people who are maybe political normies, people that don't really follow politics, that don't have strong moral convictions, which I think are the majority of people in the world and in this country, they look at that and they get afraid. and they go, oh shit, I don't want this, right? And so that's what we're talking about. So it's not a question of like, oh, if all the like there's some mass amount of centrists out here that are complaining about this would just vote in favor of what the left wants. It's like, no, I'm just saying, I know the majority of people out there, they just look at the optics of things. They look at, during like BLM, they look at like, a city block get burned down or get looted or rioted, or, there's a lot of rioting, and it just turns them completely off of helping you.
Yeah.
So, but do you understand that so if the centrists come around and support you, that's not going to change anything.
It's really weird that you're saying that you're a small minority when we understand that there are more Democrats in the United States than Republicans. Now, we're not talking about like who votes or who wins, because American politics is fucked. But in terms of like pure numbers, but in terms of like raw numbers, if all Democrats and centrists and liberals came out and vote, like Republicans would never win, period. We know this. Those are the numbers.
Well, okay. So, it depends, because number one, they don't, so it doesn't matter. And then number two, even if they did, maybe for certain elections, but maybe not for, Senate and presidency, because it's not a pure population vote. So
here's what frustrates me. If you are a small minority and you understand that you're very sympathetic to the causes of the left, right? But you're a small minority. You can't do anything. The normies are the one that are turned off by it. It sounds like you're a perfect conduit to get the normies to be less afraid. Instead, you pander to the normies by whining about how annoying the leftists are, which proves that you're either not very dedicated to those ideas, or that you're just a shitty advocate. Either or. I think most centrists, and this is what the privilege talk is, they simply don't care enough to be bothered to do any type of like meaningful advocacy. They're just like, in 50 years, like racial relations will get better. It's fine.
Right.
Like, and that's okay. I'm sure they're not particularly bothered by it.
Right. So there's a reason I use the example of the civil rights movement, because that would be a movement that I would support. So I'm not saying that I personally support, every leftist movement that's going on right now. So I'm not going to,
I would never
advocate. Right. Well, as you would call me a dirty liberal. I mean, I don't believe in, I'm pretty anti socialism for the most part. So I'm not going to go out and support a lot of the leftist movements.
I'm not
I
a
wouldn't support them.
socialist.
Okay, fair enough. But I wouldn't support a lot of leftist movements that are, to the left of liberalism, whatever we want to call them, from that level. But I was just saying that when you hear someone tell you that they do support you, or they're more supportive of you, and they talk about the optics of the thing, that's what they're talking about. They're not talking about privilege. They're talking about the practicality of getting people on your side. And it just, I feel like a lot of extremists, they just don't want to accept that, because it doesn't feel good. Like I understand it feels good to be out there and to be, fucking shit up, right? We all like that, to have the energy and the adrenaline pumping through our veins. I just don't think it's effective political strategy. It's hard for me to look in our history and see where that has been effective political strategy, at least in our recent.
What do you mean by fucking things up? Are we talking about like riots right now? Like, what are we?
Sure, yeah. Well, I mean, you could go. The BLM stuff was like a really good example. There was you're familiar with like 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙 was some polling guy who came out and he was talking about how we as a society should in the left should be really trying to push against people rioting because it helps right wingers win elections. And he had all the data for this, and he talked about how Nixon basically won on the back of a bunch of riots, and the left just attacked him, and he got fired. I mean, he got rehired eventually by someone else, but he got fired from his job. And it seems like people don't care about actually enacting the change that they want, or they have a different change in mind, which I think is really what's happening. But
I do have to go. Unfortunately, I have another appointment to get.
You can stick around, Katie. You don't have to take off.
I'm not tied to this. Can I give a brief outro before I?
Sure,
of course.
Go ahead. Yeah, by all means.
At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you want to happen. Politics is the art of the possible. It's what you can get to happen. So if I have to, right, pander to an audience, by hook or by crook, I will try to get those values that and principles in place that I want to implemented. The best way to do that is through persuasion and nonviolence. As soon as you
True.
try to bully, coerce, or give these very authoritative kind of methods to get your way, it turns a large segment of the population off. That's my personal take. Gang, I do these conversations all the time on my show. You can find me at twitch.tv/WhickTV or on YouTube at Wick-TV. Check me out, gang. Usually stream from 6 to 8, most weekdays. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate being here.
Yeah, thanks for putting this together. And link is in the description, guys. So you can just click on the link.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Wick.
Thanks for
Take
coming
care.
on.
Okay, wasn't that fun? Wasn't that fun? Hold on, let me figure out which screen this is that I have to... There. Ah, so you guys don't see the YouTube stuff in the background. Ooh, what a... Oh, I'm frustrated. Okay, I'm frustrated, but you know what? Katie usually does that. I love Katie. I do. But she frustrates me. Let me go into the Discord and start getting that put together. Give me one moment, friends. Okay, can you see me? Turn this on. Hopefully, and I'll start pulling people in. Bump, bump, bump. Hello, sorry for this. I'm running a little late. Can you all hear me?
Yep, I could hear you. Do I sound okay?
Oh, you're very staticky.
You're very staticky.
Yeah, I mean, we're
Am
getting
I
an
coming in
echo
crystal
from you.
clear?
Okay,
Can you
Wick.
hear me?
Yeah,
Am I coming in crystal clear? Can you hear me?
Oh, well, Killian, can you mute the stream? We're getting a little echo there. Oh, just for everyone, we are not ending the stream, gang. We're not ending the show. We're just transitioning to the next show. So for those of you who like the Adam and Sitch conversation, you're gonna love this one too. Stick around. We're gonna talk, and it's gonna be fun. We're gonna talk about education. But while you guys get stuff ready, I'm gonna change my descriptors here. Give me one moment, please.
Am I sounding okay?
Is anyone going to call me an Arsler on this stream too? I don't know. Are you guys going to call me the Arsler? I'm not sure. We're finding out.
Does it sound better?
Yeah. Sounds
What,
fine to me.
Republican?
Let me...
What was
No,
what's the
retard,
Arsler?
specifically.
Would you consider it disruptive
Oh.
speech if we did?
No.
No, I don't consider it a slur, but I know it offends people, so I try not to use it. So... Okay, I think we're good. I think we have gotten where I need to be. How are all of you today? How's everything going?
I'm doing excellent, Wick. Thank you for asking.
Good. I like the suit and tie you got going. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're missing someone. Who are we missing? iCal Rich. Give me a moment.
Oh, you're just in my chat. Rich, get in here.
I'll DM him. Ugh. Sorry, I know I'm helter skelter right now. I usually don't do back-to-back shows, so I'm trying to transition from yelly screamy mode to moderator mode. So I know that Fairy Queen, calling you Fairy and calling you Queen both seem weird. Is there something else I can call you? Like instead of Hey Fairy or Hey Queen, right?
FQ?
FQ will work.
That works. As long as it's not Dairy Queen. That's the only
Dairy
thing I
Queen.
will not
Now
accept.
I want to call you Dairy Queen, but FQ. Let's say FQ. But yeah, FQ was like, oh, do you ever debate? Well, you just missed it. Like I was on the Adam and Sitch show yelling at Katie for a while, so you know. It is what
Thank
it is.
God.
But iCal's here. Hello.
Hey, how's it going? Apparently I went to the wrong room.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine.
So my normal, boomer
All
behavior.
good. Okay, well, let's now that we're all here, that everyone can be heard, everyone can be seen, let's start the show. Welcome, one and all, to another episode of WhickTV, a cross-ideological platform where we come together to discuss topics both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. We have a wonderful cast lined up today, and we're going to be discussing public education. We're going to be discussing freedom of speech within public education. We're going to be discussing the purpose of public education and whether or not indoctrination is it acceptable and to what degree it is it acceptable and to happen in the classroom. It should be interesting. It should be good. And I'm glad that you are all here to join me for this. If you're liking this content, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you're on YouTube. If you are on Twitch, hit that follow button, throw me some gift subs, throw me some bits. I need to eat, and at the end of the day, that's how you help me eat, and I can't do this for free. So you keep giving me money, I'll keep putting you on shows. But I want to give everyone here a brief, concise introduction, a small opening statement, and then we'll just get into it. Sound good, gang? Cool. We're going to start with FQ, Fairy Queen herself. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. My name for here is Fairy Queen. A little bit about me. I am a second-year PhD student at a university. Again, I will not tell you which one. But I'm also a licensed secondary public school teacher. I am licensed in a state. I have got my student teaching during COVID, so during the spring of 2020. I've experience as a long-term substitute teacher, as well as a GED teacher for the Reasoning and Language Arts test at a local public school district. I went to at least, I moved about 11 times growing up. I was homeschooled up until high school. And after that, I went to 3 different high schools. One of them was the Department of Defense school in Incirlik, Turkey, which because my dad's job was in the Air Force. And after that, I went to 2 different Catholic private schools where I graduated from in about 2015. So I have a lot of experience with education, a lot of a wide, diverse experience as an educator, as a teacher here at the university where I work, as a graduate instructor assistant, and also as at the public school level. And if there is anything that I'm simply delighted to take part in this conversation. I'm interested to see what everyone's opinions are regarding freedom of speech and indoctrination in schools. And I hope I can give some insight as somebody who's worked inside of a multitude of different classrooms.
All right, well, thank you for being here. That's a concise isn't the word, but it was a thorough introduction, and I appreciate that. No, it's fine. Next up, Flow Trace, the drama llama himself. Go ahead.
What's up, y'all? My name is Flow Trace. My position is going to be pretty simple. I think that indoctrination is a bit of a loaded word, and it's something that fundamentally isn't that bad. It just depends on what we're indoctrinating people to believe. I think that, for example, when it comes to the subject of murder, we probably don't want that to be a neutral subject in classes. We probably want that to be, well, murder's wrong. And I think the same is true for a lot of issues. It just comes down to what is correct to indoctrinate about, and what are the practical considerations with, when people disagree, right? For example, as much as I do think schools should be indoctrinating people to believe that all people are created equal, probably isn't very likely that that would be possible to do in schools in, say, the 1830s. So I think it's just about, what do we think is right, what do we think is wrong, and what do we think is possible.
Thank you for being here. I'm eager to get into it. We'll see how it goes. Next up, someone who hasn't been on my channel in a while, but is definitely no stranger. 𝕊𝖍𝖎. Go ahead.
Hey, how's it going? My name's 𝕊𝖍𝖎. I'm a debate coach out of Texas. I guess the first thing I think about when I hear about all these is also that word indoctrination. And I think probably we're going to have to spend a lot of time figuring out which doctrines we're talking about before I would have an opinion on something like that.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here. We'll see how it goes.
Sure.
And to be clear, we're not just talking about indoctrination. There are some other incidents, but we'll get into it as we go. 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. Go ahead.
Thank you for having me. Private Catholic school from 1st to 6th grade, and then I was put into public school, and then of course I went to university and all that. I'm an IT executive. I have 3 kids that are currently. My position is going to be that, and especially when we we were first talking about the person being sent home because there are only two genders T-shirt being on, right? My position is going to be that there should be a federal mandate that all public schools should be uniformed. Everybody should wear a uniform to public schools. There shouldn't be any kind of, different kinds of T-shirts, no matter if it's a Nazi T-shirt or a Karl Marx T-shirt or trans T-shirt or any of that kind of stuff. None of that stuff needs to belong in schools. So they're there to learn about subjects, and that's what they should be taught. There shouldn't be any kind of other thing going on. So that's going to be my position. That's what I'm going to be arguing from, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for being here. Next up, first-time guest on my show, but no stranger to the stream, 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙. Hello.
Hey everybody, I'm 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙. This is my first time ever doing something like this, so I'd appreciate your patience with my setup, my voice, stuff like that. But similar to FQ, I also want to grab some insight, or rather give away insight, because I'm more approaching this from the legal aspect. I'm a 3L in law school. I finished all my classes. I'm basically graduated, so I look forward to taking the bar exam and hopefully passing. And I'm just interested to discuss this from a legal perspective. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. I'm not perfect. There's things I might miss or might not know, but I'm excited and look forward to it.
I feel underdressed.
Look, it's fine. Look, I appreciate dressing up. It's not required.
Yeah, I do too.
But the suit and tie is fly as fuck. That's all I gotta say with that. So great first impressions, right?
Yeah,
I
it
really
is.
appreciate
the field, so.
So I guess to start us off, right? So the reason we're having this discussion is that there was an incident last week, maybe the week before, of a 12-year-old boy wore a shirt to school that said there are only two genders. He was sent home from class. I don't know if there was any other discipline given to him or anything like that. But the question came to my mind, is this okay? Should people expressing, children specifically, who are in school expressing their views be censored like this, or be sent home or forced to change because of the content of what is printed on their shirt? And where are those lines in these things? Now, the question also becomes, can teachers do the same? Where are the lines there? What is the purpose of public education? We're going to talk about all of that, but I want to open it up to the panel. If you have trouble getting in, let me see your wonderful, lovely hands. Make sure I can see them clearly, and I will give you space. But other than that, go hog wild, gang. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to speech in schools, I think the status quo of Tinker versus Des Moines, I believe is the case, is a pretty good one. I think there very obviously needs to be some degree of protection for speech in schools of their students. I don't think it seems appropriate. I would imagine to most of us that, for example, a school could discriminate based on the content of speech that might be, political in nature. But clearly there do need to be also some restrictions. You can't scream over the teacher when they're trying to, teach a lesson. So I think the only real workable standard that we have is when it comes into conflict with the actual teaching process. I think this is a case that I would side against the school on. I don't think the kid should have been sent home, but it is a bit of an edge case. I think it is a difficult line. For example, I imagine most of us would say if you wore a short that was covered in racial epithets, that's probably one where we're more saying, okay, I don't know if that should necessarily be allowed in a school. So I think this is a bit of an edge case. I think it's okay for the school to make this decision and then for it to be appealed to the courts, but I don't think that there really needs to be a lot of change from the status quo. I think we have a really good system as it exists where the courts can then look at these edge cases and make better practical rules for them in the future.
Well, in this specific case, so maybe I missed it in that, but and forgive me if I did. In this specific case, right? Do you think that this is going to hold up in court if the parents did decide to take this to court and sue for their child's ability to wear this shirt? Do you think it'll hold up under those standards?
I think so, but I'm not a lawyer, so I would degrade my confidence in that opinion. But from my understanding, I don't think this represents a significant disruption of the teaching process, so I don't think the school's in the right to send the kid home for it.
Yes.
FQ. Oh, I apologize. I was just going to ask 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙 your opinion on that under the Tinker standard, because my understanding of the Tinker standard is that it has to either be a substantial disruption in the classroom, or it has to infringe or impede upon the rights of others. In your opinion, does this particular case fall into either of those two categories under Tinker?
Yeah, in my opinion, I think this is a classic case of viewpoint discrimination. The substantial disruption test that began with Tinker is a very high bar, and it was also expanded on in other cases. In Rosenberger, the Supreme Court said that discrimination against speech because of its message is presumed to be unconstitutional. So it's already starting out with like, okay, we're presuming this is unconstitutional, and then the school has the burden. It's not the burden on the child, but rather the school has to prove that it was a substantial burden, and what they did it for a compelling interest, and it was narrowly tailored to that interest. And in Tinker even, there was a quote in page 509 of the Reporter where the Supreme Court said that the prohibition has to be caused by something more than a mere desire to avoid the discomfort and unpleasantness that always accompanies an unpopular viewpoint. And in this situation, at least from the facts that we've seen, this child was sent home from school because the message made people uncomfortable and unsafe, which is precisely the type of speech which is permissible. So I think they have a pretty decent case here.
For $5, sorry to interrupt, for $5, 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙 says, can you call guy in top middle round-headed Dylan Burns? For $5, yes I can. Round-headed Dylan Burns. Okay.
Hey, that's a badge of honor. That's a
Fair
badge of
enough.
honor.
So
I like Dylan Burns.
do we, because I know we've talked about this a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Over Twitter. And you mentioned that in your class, there was in the 2016 election, was it? Or the 2020?
It was 2016, yeah.
2016?
November.
There was an incident where there was almost a riot at your school, and you...
Not almost.
Fair enough. There was a riot at your school.
Yeah.
And you thought that anyone wearing pro-Trump gear, or like a Make America Great Again shirt or hat, would have presented a severe disruption to class. So regardless of what the legal standard is, I want to say from a moral standard is, what is your thoughts here? Like, where do you draw the line specifically?
I'm usually pretty permissive when it comes to political expression. I'm a debate coach. You would think I'd be very comfortable with all of that. But if you get to a point where just putting on one of these things is almost guaranteed to start a fight in the school, I think that meets the Tinker standard at that point. Now, you would have to be consistent about it. So if you're going to do that with a MAGA hat, then you would have to do that with a Hillary Clinton 2016 T-shirt or something as well. It would have to have been across the board. I think it would have been reasonable that year to have that rule because of what happened. I mean, kids had left their classrooms. It was as if it was passing period, but where everyone was chanting "fuck Donald Trump" and pouring out of the buildings and like trying to flip cars. And it was bad. It was really bad. I don't necessarily know that it was sparked by somebody wearing a piece of clothing. Like, I don't think that was ever cleared up. But I think it wasn't fair. Like, it wasn't safe to expect to come back to school with people wearing that stuff like that very next day. Now, whether or not I would never let them wear it, like, after that incident had sort of faded in people's memories, like I wouldn't go that far necessarily. But I think that when certain specific incidents occur, that can certainly change like your view on whether or not the Tinker standard is reasonable.
I understand that from a practical consideration, we would definitely want to remove, in extreme points of tension, we would just want to diffuse, remove them. But morally judging, I don't know if I would hold them, would we really hold the person who's wearing it responsible, or would we hold the people who are being moved to violence responsible? Because I feel like that's a pretty slippery road to say that if you're doing something that incites violence, you're the disruption. I feel like there has to be a better standard, because I feel like you get to some pretty scary places with, what's the girl who had to be escorted by paratroopers to go to her class way back in the day?
Yeah. Right.
I don't remember her name. But yeah, I feel like you can get to places like that.
There shouldn't be really a situation like that where a piece of clothing caused violence in school, right? So I would not really blame the person that's wearing the shirt, right? They're allowed to, according to the dress code. Mm-hmm. I would more blame the people against that shirt, right? I think that's where the problem would lay.
But then you, I think, have a problem with, here, I'm going to misuse a legal term, I'm sure. So Lancelot can correct me on this. But here's where you get to a situation that's akin to prior restraint, right? You don't know who's going to react to the shirt. but you know who's wearing the shirt. So if you're going to disallow it in order to prevent like something from happening in the school that you have reasonable, you have reason to believe might occur, I wouldn't necessarily say that person's in trouble. Just that we're not allowing like wearing, we're not allowing this particular type of expression at this time.
𝕊𝖏 does have a bit of a point. Federal appellate courts have expanded the disruption test to include reasonable forecasts of disruption. And when it comes to shirts and that nature, this reasonable forecast is still pretty strict. For example, a Confederate jacket by itself, if somebody wears a Confederate flag jacket to school, that's still protected speech. But when it comes to reasonable forecast of disruption, it was okay for schools to prohibit somebody from wearing a Confederate jacket in the case of Melton versus Young, when in the past semester, or at least a year prior, there was a fight or a riot that was caused because of that Confederate flag. So it's not so much because of the speech, but because something happened, and then because that happened, the school now has, a reasonable forecast that it might happen again. So in a vacuum, most speech is probably protected, even that which we might not like. But if the school has a reason to believe that it could start a fight because of something that happened in the past, then that could reach that level of a forecast of disruption.
I have some experience with that too, because I went to a high school that had a Confederate flag as its symbol when I was a kid. And there was violence once administrators started talking about removing that symbol from the school. And also there were people would start it was called flagging at the time, where they would have the Confederate flag flying from their cars on their way to the football games. And of course that would start sort of almost gang violence, but school to school, people who are supporting their teams or whatever. And so as time went on and they started getting more and more progress in terms of getting rid of this symbol and sort of changing it over. And in fact, we didn't actually change our mascot from the colonels to, it was Confederate colonel was our mascot, full dress, everything. That wasn't actually changed until 2 years ago. So it was over a 30-year period of time where all of that happened. And absolutely people would try to wear a Confederate flag paraphernalia to school, and they weren't allowed.
So this kind of bothers me a little bit. This appellate court ruling. I wasn't aware of it. But under this kind of logic, couldn't you say that if there was a riot because someone wore a trans pride shirt to school, right? They wore trans flag on their shirt. It bothered a lot of the more conservative elements, and there was a fight and a riot broke out, that the school could ban the wearing of a trans pride flag shirt because they felt that it would cause a riot in their school. Are we saying that that's okay to do?
I think it's a dangerous precedent, but it's a dangerous precedent. But I think sometimes desperate times call for desperate actions. If it really, I think the key is the intent behind its use. If there really is no reasonable way or no clear way for the school to prevent these fights by detaining people or sending them to juvie or whatever, then I think we have to concede that at some point it does. You do have to be okay, we're going to side against the little guy here, because otherwise, this school is not going to be able to function.
I'm not a fan of that ruling necessarily either. I don't think that should be a reason for, prohibiting something, because the Supreme Court has never adopted the reasonable forecast of disruption test. This is just from the Sixth Circuit Appellate Court. And
so it's never been challenged. Okay.
It's just, it depends on circuit by circuit, but some appellate courts have adopted that standard. Personally, I'm not a fan of it, because I think, we should continue just in this specific instance, was there a disruption, as opposed to looking in the past. But that's, just something courts have been doing. I'm not a fan of it either.
Okay. Killian, you were trying to get in. I want to give you some space here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it should be banned, because if it's causing any disruption to what kids are at school to do, which is learn, then it should be removed. And that's why I'm saying my stance, the easiest way to do that is to go to a school uniform policy, where you don't have to worry about what kind of t-shirts kids are wearing to school and what they say on them, because they all, and that, even, I remember Bill Clinton in 1996 in his State of the Union address mentioned about uniformity in schools. And so even Secretary of State Hillary Clinton I think back in 2016 was even, they sent out like 16,000 pamphlets to public schools talking about why schools should go to a mandatory uniform policy. It eliminates a lot of this stuff, right? And studies show, which I have a bunch of them, that it helps a lot of things in schools. And we can go through those later, but lots of stats back it up. So what I'm saying is that the Supreme Court has already ruled that uniform policy does not impinge on free speech, right? And so I think we go that route. We eliminate a lot of this stuff that's going on in our schools now, all this conflict, and start focusing on what they're really there to do, which is learn. We use, we have, go ahead.
Well, I don't mean to interrupt, but I think there's a more fundamental question. You're sort of begging the question there by saying causing the disruption, because I think I agree practically. If it's your only option to prevent the disruption is to remove the thing that people are attacking on the basis of, then yeah, go for it. But in scenarios where that isn't the case, I wouldn't disagree, because I don't think that fundamentally they're the ones causing the disruption. If I go to a school, in a liberal city, and I say, you know what, I'm a conservative and I think marriage is between a man and a woman, and people are beating me up for that, I'm not causing disruption by just expressing that. It's the people who are attacking me. Now, if really the only option is to say, hey, you need to change schools, or you can't be saying this, if that really is the only possible way to restore the school, then I do side against that. But in scenarios where it's not, you could be like, hey, if you are attacking kids on the basis of this, you are going to be visiting the police, you're going to be suspended, you're going to see detention. I do think we should be pursuing that. So I don't agree on the basis of saying that's the cause, because in scenarios where we can find alternate routes, we should be going after the actual cause, which I think is the students that are attacking the person on the basis of their speech.
I wanted to give some. So, does anyone here disagree with school uniforms, or think school uniforms is a route we shouldn't go out? I would say I disagree with that, but I'm curious if anyone else here does.
I'm not necessarily against school uniforms, but I don't think it. Or sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, FQ, go ahead.
I think I would need some clarifying questions regarding school uniforms. And one of the questions that I would ask, are you suggesting that this is a federal mandate? Are you suggesting that this is something that individual communities should decide? How would this practically be enforced?
Yeah, in my position, that is federally mandated for all public schools, K through. We could have a conversation about high schools, but most certainly primary and middle school, it would be federally mandated by the federal government that all public schools that receive public funding go to a uniform policy.
So even if I were to grant you that it's true that it does have, and I do think that it's true that schools that have uniforms, that require uniforms, probably have better attendance. They more than likely have fewer behavioral problems. I'm sure that that is true. I'm also sure, as somebody who's worked in a public school, that it would be very difficult to enforce. It would be very difficult to have all parents supply their students with the uniforms that were necessary. It would be hard for some parents to afford to buy the uniforms in question. If you're talking about public schools and not private schools, I know that buying new clothes every year, as somebody who went to a private school, as somebody whose family sent my younger siblings to a private school, uniforms are not cheap. They are expensive. They're expensive to buy, especially if we're talking about young children, which it seems as though you are. And so, I know that I can't even get some of my students to bring a pencil and a piece of paper to class. I'm not sure how practically I would be able to get a wide swath of my students to agree to wear to a certain dress code more than they already do. And we already have plenty of behavior problems with those students anyway.
So when I was in, you're right. Back when I was in private school, you had to, it was pretty costly for a uniform, right? But now, they sell them at Walmart, they sell them at Target for a pretty decent price, right? They're not really as expensive as they used to be. I think some cases, back when I was getting there, like $150, right, for a uniform. But I pay triple figures in taxes every year, okay? And I would be okay. This is something I'd be okay with my tax dollars going to. It'd be to subsidize those parents that can't afford that, right, based on their income or what other kind of metric you want to put out there. I'd be willing to help them pay for those uniforms. So go ahead.
Okay, here. Maybe this will get to the heart of it. I see iCal. I'll get you in here, but maybe let's get to the heart of it. Say we did implement a school uniform system. school uniforms. And then, during class, one of the people within the class, one of the students, said, I believe there are only 2 genders. Should that be protected, or they should not be allowed to say that? Because, again, given the fact that it's disruptive and it's not, and it's a political statement, right? If wearing a shirt with that statement would cause a disruption, why would it be different if they said it?
I don't think it would be.
Yeah, and that's the problem. It just begs the question. Okay, you stop them from showcasing it, but if the messaging is the problem, why not just ban that type of speech? And we can see, or at least I hope you can see, how that gets into really dicey areas really quick.
It is different in some ways. Like for example, if you're wearing a shirt and it has a message on it, regardless of what the message is, that shirt can be seen by thousands of other kids every day. So that's really more the equivalent of getting on the loudspeaker and saying your message. So I guess then my response would be, okay, how is letting them wear a shirt that has that message any different than letting them go to the microphone at the front office and shouting that message like around the school?
Yeah, so that was going to be obviously you can't suppress speech, right? I mean, you can't do that.
You
can. Well, you shouldn't. You shouldn't. I don't think you should.
Well, there's certain kinds of speech, right? Like if you're screaming over the teacher or saying like, I'm going to kill a fellow student.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And you could talk about there's only 2 genders may offend some people, and you can even, they're not on the same level, right? But we can talk about that. But I agree with 𝕾𝖎𝖙. If somebody says that in a classroom, you can either ignore it, because I mean you may be talking to 20 to 32 other students, right? Or you can say, okay, let's talk about that. Why do you believe that? In those situations, right, and where it's in a controlled environment with a limited amount of students and with the teacher being there. When you're wearing a T-shirt, like 𝕾𝖎𝖙 said, you may have 2,000 other students that will see that, right? And it may be the wrong one or the wrong group of students that see that, and then you have a big issue going on.
Wait, why does it have to be in classroom? Why can't they just be at lunch or something, or in the schoolyard and just say it loudly, right? I mean, again, maybe this is, I went to a lot of schools when I was growing up too. My dad was also in the military. So, but in every school I was in, during the lunch, people would shout and yell and have a good time all the time. And they'd shout things and yell things, and there'd be fights and people would drop. It was loud, it was messy, it was uncontrolled, right? So again, like, sure, if they said it in the classroom, I understand your point, but if they're in the lunchroom, what's preventing them from just saying that? Do you see I don't think that gets around the concept that I'm trying to get at here, right?
Well, you said classroom, so I was just responding to that.
Sad Kit Kat, thank you for the raid. 32 people, welcome. We're talking about public education. We're talking about dress codes right now. And there's a lot of people here talking about free speech in the classroom, the purpose of education. So welcome. Have a happy stay, and I hope you stay, and hit that follow button. But anyway, let's continue. Go ahead.
Push back slightly about what Killian said. If I recall correctly, he said that when somebody talks, they could just ignore it or have a conversation about that. I would argue that the same thing would apply with a shirt, insofar as somebody could ignore the shirt or they could choose to have a conversation. I believe in the case with the child who was sent away, Liam Morrison, he did say, at least according to his theory of events, that people supported his message and did talk to him about that issue, and they were generally in favor of it. And I understand that a shirt is more constant perhaps, but I feel like most of the time you could still reasonably just look the other way or ignore it. I know some issues sometimes sparks passion within people, or they're sensitive issues, but I still feel the onus would still be on the person viewing the shirt to be able to comport themselves appropriately.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Also, if we're talking about dress codes, I saw some people mentioning dress codes and how schools can just kind of make dress codes and people have to follow them, but it's not necessarily that simple. Dress codes can kind of be compared to like laws, for example, because they're regulations, they're regulating what people can do. And when this specific case on the 2022-2023 student handbook, page 45, bullet point 3, there was a quote that says, clothing must not state, imply, or depict hate speech or imagery that targets groups based on race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, religious affiliation, or any other classifications. So that dress code, for example, could be compared to a law that prevents people from, implying or directing hate speech to certain people. But that's difficult because
Yeah.
one, hate speech isn't an exception, and two, there was actually a similar appellate court from the same Sixth Circuit where it said a regulation from the dress code preventing provocative symbols that was too vague and it violated the First Amendment. So the dress code is not going to save people from violating the First Amendment. And I apologize. I believe somebody wanted to speak.
Well, I was just going to say, then you have to get in a debate about what's hate speech, right? And then you have that whole debate you have to get into.
Yep.
And that's why I'm just advocating for what I'm advocating for. That eliminates all that stuff.
But at what
somebody else
cost?
But I think
Oh, go on.
what you talking about the students' freedom of expression?
Yes. This is my thing. This is, if I may, because I know we're down one, we're short one. So I'll step in a little bit more than I normally would here. I think that even if it is going to be disruptive, that there is a value in allowing students to have a freedom of expression when it comes to their clothing and how they present themselves, right? I think that it may be harder to corral and harder to stay on topic or whatever, but I think that's a cost that is more easily borne than the cost that comes from coddling, and I do believe it's coddling students by preventing them from seeing any distasteful or disruptive messaging whatsoever on other people's clothing. I think that allowing kids to express themselves freely forces, quote unquote, children to deal with dissonant opinions from their own, so that when they see it when they're older, that they don't get violent and start riots because they saw a mean thing on a shirt. That's my position.
Oh yeah, but okay. The only word that I objected to there was whatsoever, right? Because the word whatsoever implies that you either allow all symbols or none, like that
That's what
there
I'm
can't
saying.
be like sort of judgment calls with regard to this. And I don't think you intend to say someone can wear a swastika on their shirt to school, right? I think when it
I
comes
go back
to
and forth on that, to be honest with you. But yeah.
okay, well,
Makes
that's
sense.
not what
Yeah,
whatsoever, right? If your rule is whatsoever, then it would be
No, I don't have to
that
go.
you'd be coddling.
No. I don't have to go to these really extreme things. I can get off the logic train at any point I want. I can say we could build in exceptions for like absolutely like swastikas specifically, but those exceptions have to be specific. Those exceptions have to be
Sure.
well documented, and those they can't be arbitrary.
So
And
when
I
you're
want
those.
when you're
If-
defining hate speech, you're
Just real
not.
quick. No, I wouldn't.
Yeah,
I
go
wouldn't
ahead.
hate speech. I wouldn't make that an exception. Like I said, I go back and forth on it. Like intend.
But a swastika is hate speech, right? Like
Yes, but I err on the side of allowing it, in my opinion.
okay, all right. I think your school would have some liability issues.
It might, right? But free speech has liability issues. Okay, I mean, like I'm not a court. Like, look, I understand why.
Yeah, but you can
Go on.
express your free speech outside of school. You can express who you are outside
Yes,
of
but
school.
but
School is a
just
very
because
finite
you
amount of time.
Yes, but just because you could do it somewhere else, I don't think necessarily exempts like any state body from like the restrictions they have on your freedoms. Like ultimately, if we're forcing people to go to school, I feel like there's some obligation or responsibility that like the state has to like not totally impede on their rights.
Well, they can still talk, right? They can still speak, right? I'm just talking about
Well, I think there's
symbols
probably a
and
bit more
flags
freedom.
and imagery and things like that.
Wait,
that's
so
what
you
I'm
wouldn't allow
advocating for.
swastikas, but you'd allow a slogan to be said, right? A Nazi slogan or something?
Yeah,
Okay.
at school. Yeah.
What about the symbol? What about the symbol is so specific then, or is so uniquely like
Well,
disruptive?
because it's seen constantly and on a constant basis. It's seen by more people, especially in a T-shirt, or let's say a teacher had a flag on the wall that was a swastika. I mean, I wouldn't want that either, right? So there's a difference. There's a difference there in my mind. Now, you may call it crazy, but I believe there's a difference in speech and then symbols and flags that are T-shirts and clothing that can be seen by a lot of people on a daily basis.
I think that whether I think there's maybe a fair point to be made in regards to the degree to which it is seen and therefore the degree to which it is disruptive, but I don't think there's much fruit to be had in the arguments of like, well, if it's not literal verbal speech, then it doesn't have the same protections. I think forms of political expression can take a lot, is not just limited to the things that we say, and those things should still be seen just as should not be seen as different under the aspects of the First Amendment simply by virtue of them not being a different medium. If that medium is substantively different, such as, for example, being seen more often, like you say, I think that's fair. But I don't think it's the case that that freedom of speech only applies to literal speech.
I'm with Wick on this one a little bit. From what I could tell, a Nazi shirt or something like that would probably be protected speech in a vacuum. And I know some people are talking about, like, what's the value in that? And I know when it comes to universities and colleges, a lot of people talk about the value of having your ideas challenged and, having different opinions. And I feel like that value is still something that applies, at least to a lesser degree, in public schools. And I feel like when it comes to the kid wearing the shirt, there's a value in him being challenged on it, of course, and hopefully having the chance to, have his mind change, especially at such a young age. And when it comes to the other people seeing that image, I feel like there's value in being, having that opportunity to reinforce your beliefs, because a lot of people believe things, but then, in a situation like that, it kind of forces them or puts them in a situation where they have to, articulately argue against that and be able to have a conversation where they could defend the beliefs that they believe.
Yeah, and even outside of the context, sorry, go ahead.
FQ, go ahead.
I think that that's an excellent point, Lancelot. I really appreciate you talking about the differences, like especially like when we talk about like college free speech and about the importance of being exposed to different ideas. But one thing that's special about going to a public high school or even a public middle school is the fact that you have to go. You can elect to go to a public university. You can choose as an adult to go to a community college. But unless your parents opt to homeschool you or send you to a private school, you are mandated by law to go through a public high school or a public middle school. And that makes a big difference when we're thinking about these questions of speech, because it's not even just about what's best for the students. It's not even just about what's best for the teachers or what the parents want for their students. It's people who do not have children who have an interest in making sure that the schools remained as free as possible when it comes to the concern of speech, right? We have an interest in schools outside of our parental obligations to children. We also have an interest in them as citizens, right? And what kinds of speech we're allowing to be heard within a public government-owned facility.
One other thing I wanted to add, Wick, I'm okay also with, sociology class and things like that, or gender actually exposed to other ideas that are out there, right? You can have those debates and those discussions in a controlled environment. So I'm not saying, just because you go to a uniform school, you can't have discussions about, gay rights or transsexual rights or anything like that, right? You could have, you could have course, things like that in the school where you're exposed to these different ideas. You're just not where it's just not on a daily basis, and it's in a more controlled environment.
I know Flowtrace wanted to get in, so I'll give it to you before I'm trying to juggle being moderator and
No,
being
I
the
understand.
sixth
Yeah.
person, but go ahead, Flo.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of valuable discussion about sort of the benefits of having these ideas exposed, and these are good. But I think it leads to a little bit of dangerous logic, which is that you need some sort of justification for freedom of speech. Freedom of speech should have its limits, but I think it is a good in and of itself. I don't think we should need to point to, well, if we allow people to express their ideas more freely, there will be a marketplace of ideas. I generally tend to think there are a lot of benefits to freedom of speech, but I think the ability for human beings to freely express themselves is a value in and of itself. And I just worry when we start to sort of hinge a lot of the reasons why, well, we should have freedom of speech because it leads to these benefits. That sort of, in a way, implies that if not for those benefits, maybe we would be a lot in favor of a lot more restrictions. And I don't think generally that should be the case. I think human beings, particularly kids that are being forced to go to school, like that's one of the most important times for you to be able to express yourself as a human being, to find yourself. And even if it doesn't lead to you finding a better version of yourself, I still think it's an important part of the human experience that should be protected. Obviously, I think we all agree there are limits here, But I really don't like this framing that, well, it might be conducive to the educational process, so we'll allow it here, but we won't allow it there. If the government is going to say, from whenever you have to go to kindergarten to 18, you need to report to this state officiated place to do these things that we force you to do, then I think there's a huge responsibility of the state to make sure that the rights that we recognize that those kids do have outside of there do have at least some protection. It seems like ludicrous to me that we would say we're going to force you to go here. Oh, and by the way, now that we force you here, you have a significantly less protection of the rights that you would otherwise have. That seems like a really slippery slope.
Well, they're already infringing on your rights by making you go. I mean,
I agree.
Right?
I agree,
okay.
but
okay.
Yes, but we should still seek to minimize. I think the existence of the state in of itself is a violation of your rights. But that doesn't mean that I think that means we should have hog wild and have slavery or things like that. Just because we're forcing people
What's
there.
going on, Scott? Is that you? I don't.
Listen. I used to be when I was in high school. I was a libertarian. I was the person causing all these fights, and I still believe that libertarians are right. Taxation is theft. I just think that theft is okay sometimes.
It's funny you said that, Wick, because you're kind of reminding me of Scott here, because it sounds to me as if your conception of free speech is not tied to outcomes in any way, right? That we can't really look to consequences, right, in order to provide any context to the degree to which we can limit speech.
Well,
if we're gonna say our freedom of speech is so absolute that we can send a young Jewish kid to a school where a significant number of kids feel like it's okay to wear swastika shirts around them and which might ultimately end up in some really unfortunate situations when those communities sort of come together or clash. I mean, can we not look at those consequences and then say, okay, can this inform us in terms of how we whether or not we determine this level of speech?
Let me ask you a question in return.
Sure.
Do you think that in this hypothetical that you've posed, where we send a Jewish child to a school where a bunch of people or some of the kids wear swastika shirts, by preventing those kids from wearing those swastika shirts, is the Jewish child any more or less safe?
I would say more.
Really?
Yeah.
Because
I've lived through it. Not with swastikas, with Confederate flags, but absolutely think that the black kids at my school are safer now than they were when I was
feel more safe. Well, that's not because.
Well, I'm talking about the number of incidents.
That's not because that people aren't allowed to wear certain symbols. That's because they are less racist than Nazis, right? If you have a school,
those two things are connected.
They are not connected. If you have a school, right, where there are people who would otherwise wear these images, but the law simply prevents them from doing so, they are not any less or more likely to hurt or make this person unsafe.
I watched it happen at our
some
school.
statistics.
And once you took those things away, for one thing, every single time a black kid saw somebody wearing a Confederate flag, it started a conversation, sometimes started a fight. And when those shirts suddenly were no longer in the school, it wasn't that kids stopped being racist overnight. I do agree that over time they became less so, but it's not that it happened overnight the day they stopped allowing us to wear those shirts in school. It was because the opportunity to see the message and then react to it went away.
Yeah, can I give you some statistics here real quick on that? You were talking about feeling less safe or more safe and all that. So there was a school system in Long Beach, California. So 2 years, they went to a district-wide K mandatory uniform policy. So after 2 years, they did a study. The reports of assault and battery decreased by 34%. Assault with a deadly weapon dropped by 50%. Fighting incidents went down 51%. Sex offenses were cut by 74%. Robbery dropped 65%. Possession of weapons or weapon lookalikes decreased by 52%. And then another one, 1 year after Sparks Middle School in Nevada, they instituted a uniform policy, which I know we're talking about uniforms, but it's you can't wear the T-shirt. School police data showed a 63% drop in police log reports, and decreases were also noted in gang activity, student fights, graffiti, property damage, and battery. And then there was also a peer-reviewed study that found that the schools with uniform policies, which are, you can't wear certain T-shirts to school, the fewer had a 12% fewer firearm-related incidents and 15% fewer drug-related incidents in school without uniforms. and possession of drugs went down by 69%, and vandalism was lowered by 18%. And I've got those studies if you want them.
I would like to look at them. I can't engage with them, unfortunately, because I haven't looked into the studies.
I will actually send them to you.
I'll just posit that they're true. I'll say, sure, those studies actually happened, and they're fine. I guess the question becomes, right, even if limiting speech, right, even if limiting speech makes people safer, I still think it's a bad thing to limit speech. Even if it makes people safer. I could make everyone safer if I lock them indoors and I force them to have certain procedures done to them medically and I force them to do certain things. I could make everyone super safe, but we would be violating their freedoms in other ways that I don't think is worth, that I do not think is worth this trade up in cost. And people say, and I think there is a value in learning how to deal with conflict. Right? In learning how to deal with conflict in the proper ways. And while, yes, it may be more dangerous not to have school uniforms, I will posit to that. That's fair. That is something that I do not think is worth the cost. And you say, well, you don't have kids, Wick. I have nephews and nieces who go to school. Like my little nephew got me this, and he's going to be starting school.
Well, I had no idea if you had kids.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't make a difference.
Yeah,
that doesn't make a difference. Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, so... I do have.
We're better suited.
Right.
We got a bird's eye view.
Is that Galactus?
So I think you're going to the extremes, though. You know, I'm with you.
I do think.
I don't think you can lock people in their homes.
I think uniforms are an extreme.
Oh, I don't think so. No, not at all. I mean, that's why. I mean, most of your parochial schools, right? Your kid, the wealthy people that send their kids to school and they pay $45,000 a semester, they all wear uniforms. There's a reason why. There's a reason why, like in Japan, you know, their education systems testing is, I mean, it's way better than ours. They all wear uniforms, every single one of them. There's a reason why those statistics are the way they are, right? And I don't think it's extreme to ask a kid in a public school to wear a uniform to school every day. I mean, sometimes when you get older and you work a job, the police have to wear a uniform. If you work at McDonald's, you have to wear a uniform.
You opt into those. This is a difference. It comes into one you opt into. Public school you do not opt into. Public school is force. Public school is coercion. You are not opting in to this. It is not a choice you are making. It is a choice being thrust upon. It is an action being thrust upon you. That is the difference between someone who is a police officer or a military person or anything having to wear the uniform because they chose to engage in that profession. A child does not choose to go to school. They are, and I think for good reason, forced to go to school, right? But that
you're infringing on their rights, though, Wick. Right? You're infringing on their rights when you do that.
Some rights I'm okay with infringing it to a certain degree.
Well, there you go.
Others I'm not. This isn't an absolutist. I don't have to be okay with it all to be okay with some.
Right, and I don't either. That's what I'm saying. And I don't think it's an extreme position at all. I mean, I have to, you know, let's just say, there's like, for instance, there's a teacher in our public school right now that has an LGBTQ flag in their classroom. What if I, as a parent, didn't want my children exposed to that? I don't have a choice, right? I have to send my kid to school, and they're going to be exposed to it. So they're infringing on my kid's rights not to have to see that, or my rights for the kid not wanting my kid to see that. Luckily, I don't care.
You have a right not to see it.
Luckily, I don't care. But what I'm saying is that if I don't want my kid exposed to that, I don't have a choice in that matter, and neither does the child.
But there's an answer to that. I mean, the answer is you can do what my parents did, which is you can choose to send your children either to private school or you can choose to homeschool your children. And ironically, and a lot of parents make that decision. Some
can't, though. Some have to work or they can't afford a private school.
And I also think that just because there's a way to opt out doesn't mean you ditch any obligations you have. Like, just because, like, for example, if it was the case that, for example, to go to school, you had to be a Republican, no Democrats allowed, we wouldn't say, well, Democrats still have an option in private school. We'd probably say, well, that's not fair, given the fact that you're forcing them to. I think it might lessen the obligation the state has, but the state, I think, still has a pretty high obligation to protect the rights of the kids.
There's a level of cohesion either way, right? Because we still have state curriculum that private schools have to follow, that homeschools have to follow. There's a certain the curriculum has to be to some degree standardized. When I go to debate tournaments, public and private schools are at those same tournaments, like competing with each other, and they're exchanging ideas that they themselves pick, like to choose to argue with. So that there's a lot of commonality there. So if the only difference is like have to do with school uniforms, even that gets a little bit fuzzy, because you'll see school uniforms at charter schools all the time, and those are public schools. They're just public schools that get released from certain rules that other public schools have to follow.
Uniforms, I would say. Well, the
Go
whole
ahead.
topic of uniforms and thank you, and dress codes is kind of murky when it comes to the law. It hasn't really been definitively decided one way or the other. Morally, I would say I'm more on the side of not having uniforms, just because I do value the First Amendment and the freedom to express oneself. But even if, all fairness to Killian, if uniforms are found to be okay and permissible, the line is still drawn somewhere, because even if uniforms are okay, and that's fine, I'm willing to stipulate to that, there's still going to be a First Amendment right that children do have, like wearing armbands, the famous Tinker case. That's what the symbol was all about, is wearing armbands to protest a war. So even if they do have uniforms, it's not going to solve the issue entirely, because I doubt that there's ever going to be a ruling that just First Amendment protections altogether are denied, in schools. So I would say that even if uniforms are, allowed and permissible in terms of First Amendment, we still have to think about the other implications of what if a child wants to wear an armband or wants to wear a certain hat that's permitted by the dress code, or certain accessories that still allow them that, freedom to express themselves, and how you would all feel about that.
And even if you don't have school uniforms, you still have dress codes, right? So you can't wear, I sometimes I used to, every once in a while, I have to go be the detention guy who sits there while all the kids come in school suspension or whatever. And one of the things that I noticed was that in the mornings I would get a lot of girls and no boys, and for a while I couldn't figure out why. Like, all these girls getting in school suspension? No, it was they were found in violation of the dress code, and it was because they'd have holes in their jeans, and they'd get sent to ISS for that, and they'd have to have their parents come up, get them new pants or whatever,
Or the
skirts.
fingertip thing that you
right.
your
But the
shorts have
reason
to
I'm
be-
talking
yeah.
about holes in your jeans is that boys have holes in their jeans too, but they never got busted for it. Like, there was a different standard between boys and
Yep.
girls or whatever. So there are a lot of problems with regards to dress code that apply whether or not there's a uniform in place. So you're always going to have to deal with drawing the line somewhere. You're not this perfect, absolute freedom of speech thing when it comes to clothing, doesn't exist in any school anywhere.
This is okay. So two things. One, I do want to move it onto something Killian said, and I wanted to kind of look at it from another angle. But before I do that, just to address this, yes, because we can't make it perfect doesn't mean we shouldn't strive to get as perfect as we can get to, right? So we recognize that no matter what system, no matter how free or permissive or how strict it is, that there are going to be problems with it. Yes, true. But that doesn't mean that we just throw our hands up and say, well, guess we can't do anything. No, we can absolutely make policy and codes and regulations that kind of are either more or less permissive. And I want to err on the side of permissiveness. Now, I do want to change the focus just a little bit, if we may. Because Killian made a statement that I'm curious what everyone else would say about and would think on. That he said that a teacher who flew the LGBT pride flag in school was somehow disruptive or violating. So I want you to elaborate a little bit on how you feel that disrupts or violates your autonomy or the kids' autonomy. Just give us your take on that, and then we can frame it around that, because I'm curious from the teacher's perspective what kind of regulations and rights that they have to express themselves, and is it different than the students? And let's find out. So Killian, go ahead.
Yeah, so I don't think they should have any sort of.
Oh, and thank you for the $5, a prat. Gang, if you guys have money
okay.
you want to give to me to ask questions, super chat, throw bits and subs in the thing.
Are we on Twitch too?
We're on Twitch too. So gift
Twitch
subs,
Primes.
gift bits.
Twitch Primes.
Okay,
Twitch Primes.
go on.
Yeah. So again, I'm not just talking about students. I also think teachers shouldn't be in their classroom, shouldn't have religious flags, Nazi flags, LGBTQ flags, communist flags. None of that stuff should be in a classroom that might cause conflict with the teacher and the students at all. Because again, you're disrupting the learning process, in my opinion. And you're there, if you're a science teacher, there to teach science, and that's what you should be doing, is teaching science. And I don't necessarily want your own morality or your own ideas about your personal life, expressed in the classroom outside of science.
This feels like such an inhuman. Or sorry, go ahead, Wick.
No, I'm asking, what are our thoughts, gang?
Okay.
That's what I said.
Yeah, this feels like such an inhuman approach to like the relationship of a student and teacher. The reality is that the job of a teacher is primarily to teach a subject, but it is also to be a responsible adult in the child's life. I don't know about any of you, but some of my most important relationships in my entire life have been with teachers who gave me advice and instruction on things to do that were not just about education. In sporting, right, the relationship of a coach, almost as like a second father sometimes, is massively influential to people's lives. I can understand, there's certainly something that they should be doing, right? A teacher should not be evangelizing from, the lectern, right? They should not be using their position specifically. But to just have an LGBT flag or to express, well, these are my opinions, if you do ask about them, I think that's a step too far. It takes a village to raise a child, and part of the truth behind that statement is the fact that two parents can be a kind of an echo chamber for a kid. And it's important for them to go and experience other things, particularly when you're getting to like high school. It's super important for you to be exposed to teachers who don't agree with your parents. Not so the teachers can just, rail on you about how Obama is great or Obama is bad, but just to have that experience of different people from different walks of life. So I understand where you're coming from, but I feel like the specific examples you give are over the line, where I would consider those to be fine and appropriate.
Mhm. I also think.
FQ,
sorry.
then Lancelot. So we'll go FQ, then we'll go to Lancelot. Go ahead.
Thank you. So my specific background is an English literature teacher. So we read books. So we've read 1984, we've read Animal Farm, Lord of the Flies, etc. And on one level, I would agree with you, Killian. I don't think it's appropriate for a teacher to talk about their personal political beliefs or to evangelize as, I'm so sorry, what is your name? Flo Trace just recently said.
Flo Trace.
Well, no, wait, can I ask you about that? FQ, just real quick. So if a student comes up to a teacher and says, "Hey, there's this incident on the news I saw. What do you think, teacher?" Do you not think the teacher should be able to give their opinion on the matter at hand and say, "Well, I actually support this thing," right?
I think that you should, but I think there's a difference between trying to, I've had teachers who have admittedly tried to evangelize to their students before, but I don't think that means that you, as Flo Trace says, that means you have to be completely inhuman. You do have your opinions, you do have a life, and I think that it's okay to be honest about what you think, but then move on and teach what you're supposed to teach. However, and this is the part that I feel a bit concerned about what you said, Killian. It's one thing if we're talking about 8 million flags on the wall behind you. It's another thing, though, if, say, we're in high school and it's junior year and I'm distributing, for instance, 1984, and it's on the state curriculum. That is a political book. We read Animal Farm. That is a political book. Lord of the Flies is a political book. Part of the job of an English teacher at the high school level is to teach books that have political histories to them. And I think that while on the one hand, it's true that you shouldn't try to impose your personal beliefs, I think it's also dishonest to say that it would be impossible for a teacher not to express some of their personal beliefs, right? So if I'm, for instance, explaining the history of 1984, I'm necessarily going to have to talk about George Orwell's time in Spain. I'm going to have to talk about the fact that his time fighting against fascism. I'm going to have to explain when I talk about Animal Farm, about how he wasn't a pro-capitalist, about how he was a democratic socialist throughout most of his life. These are political facts, and the older you become, the more you get into college and in the later years of high school, the more when you're talking about history and when you're talking about literature, unfortunately, you are going to have to talk about politics sometimes. And I think that means that you have to be a careful practitioner so that everyone has their voice and opinion heard. But at the same time, you can't allow, there are going to be some opinions in the school that are in the classroom that are unacceptable to express at the same time.
Yeah, I'm not advocating against any kind of political talk inside of a classroom. Obviously, you have to have that. I read all those books. They were all great books. Great discussions around those books. I'm not advocating for you not the different political views in a book that you're reading, right? I'm just saying, I don't feel like kids need to know the teacher's own personal view on things, right? You are going to have some inherent biases. I understand that, but it doesn't need to be out there and in the front of what is going on in the classroom.
Would you ban teachers from wearing their wedding ring?
No.
But you would ban them with a LGBT pride flag? What's the difference?
Well, I mean, you could be. We have friends that are lesbians that are married. I mean, they wear wedding rings. I don't have a problem. I mean, this has nothing to. I want you to understand. This has nothing to do with, LGBTQ, right? This has everything. I'm talking about any kind of flag, BLM, even right-wing flags,
what about the American
Nazism,
flag?
Things like that. Well, no, not the American flag. I mean, you're in the U.S.
Why not?
I mean, that's well, because you live here. I mean, that's the
That
flag
still
of
be
your
a
country.
political position. Yeah. Well, what if it became the fact
How is that a
in their
political
country?
position?
It absolutely could be a political position. There are a lot of people in this country. I really don't agree with them, but there are a lot of people in this country that say that this country is illegitimate. It's from stolen native land, and it's illegitimate to this day. And they would consider that using that flag to be a legitimizing of that and the genocide of the Native Americans. I don't agree with that, but that's absolutely a political statement.
Oh, okay. Well, no, I think the American flag's fine to fly. You can call me a hypocrite or whatever. I think that's the most extreme example. But yeah, I mean, I think it's okay to fly the American flag in a classroom if you will.
I think it is an extreme example, but I still think it's a legitimate one. I think it's really difficult to draw a line where we say this is the political stuff and this isn't, because as soon as something becomes hotly contested in the realm of politics, it is political. As soon as you try to ban something, you could make the argument that simply doing that thing as expressing a measure of resistance is political in of itself. So I think I think what is and isn't political is a can of worms that you're never going to be able to give a strict line for. And so I think it's a foolish yardstick to then use to judge what we should and shouldn't allow.
I think it's just logic and common sense that the American flag is totally separate from what I'm talking about. I mean, we live in the U.S. We fly the flag everywhere. I don't even know if it's been challenged in the Supreme Court that you're not allowed to fly the flag. I just think that's ridiculous. I think it's totally separate issue. Common sense and logic would tell you it'd be okay to fly American flag.
If a student asks the teacher,
I think common sense is where logic goes to die.
If a student asks the teacher, "Hey, who did you vote for in the last election?" Do you think the teacher should be able to say? To tell the student.
Are you asking me, or are you asking the panel?
You specifically, and I'm curious what the rest of the panel thinks. But for now, we'll start with you. If a student comes up, it's like, "Hey, Mr. Killian, right, Professor Killian, who'd you vote for in the 2020 election?" Should you be allowed to give an answer to that?
How I would answer that question if I was a teacher, and how I answer that question is, where I'm at now is I say, I voted for the person that most aligns with my beliefs.
Sure, but I understand that's what you would do. But if a teacher were to say, "I voted for Biden," or "I voted for Trump," do you think that they should get in trouble? Have they done something wrong?
I don't necessarily think they should get in trouble, but that's not something I think they should be talking about in the classroom. No, because what if that student, let's just say, is a Democrat, right? And the teacher voted for Donald Trump. And so how would that affect the relationship between the teacher and the student, right? The student is like, "I hate Donald Trump. My teacher voted for Donald Trump." You don't think that's going to cause any kind of friction there at all between this? Not so much the teacher. The teacher's a mature adult, but we're talking about a teenager or a middle school kid.
Might cause friction.
Yeah.
Right. It absolutely might cause.
And I don't want
friction.
that. I don't want that in schools. I don't want that in schools.
I have
Between
a
teacher and
question.
student.
I have a question.
So FQ, then iCal, and I don't think we've gotten to Lancelot yet. So actually, we'll go Lancelot first, then FQ, then iCal. Cool? Cool. Lancelot, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Okay, so to go with should a teacher respond to that? I think they probably should. Morally, I believe that there's probably some situations where students are allowed to converse with their teachers. And I think I draw a distinction between instruction open debate between classes, and then after hours after classes. Instruction, I don't want to really touch that. That's like if they shouldn't be teaching actively political stuff or things like that, at least outside of college. But I feel like it's reasonable for some classes if it's adjacent to the topic, like history class, having a open Socratic seminar type of discussion where a teacher presents some questions and then the students debate and discuss it with themselves, because history is filled with politics sometimes. So if it's adjacent to the subject, I don't see it as concerning as if it's something like math or something like that. And if it's after hours, I feel like it's fine if the student approaches the teacher and asks a question. I feel like once they're done with their official duties and so far as instructing the class, then it's okay. And two, if the teacher asks a question or tries to participate and the student in return engages in that sort of conversation. Now, when it comes to the teacher's free speech, I think it's a bit murky and difficult because there's probably some level of free speech that they have with regard to what they have in their school offices, what they wear to school, and perhaps what they put on their desk. But there's also a doctrine called the government speech doctrine, where when somebody's a public official, what they do, at least in their official duties, or in this case perhaps as they're teaching the class, it counts as the government speech. So it's probably able to be restricted more than the speech of a student. Like, for instance, there was a case called Rust versus Sullivan, where there was a government-funded family planning, like a doctor program, and they were able to prevent the doctors from advising in favor of an abortion. So that went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said this is government speech because the government's funding it. These are government employees, so the government is able to prevent these people from suggesting abortion as an alternative to, something they should do when someone's pregnant, basically. So when it comes to school specifically, it hasn't been decided, but you could argue that at least when they're teaching and instructing students, they probably shouldn't be allowed to do that, or at least the school should be able to restrict that type of speech. But outside of instruction, when the class is over or when they're having a discussion, I think that's probably fine.
That also reminds me, I believe there was a case, or sorry, go ahead.
No, it's fine. So $5 from 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙 to say, a lot of professions require suspension of the First Amendment. Per my company, I can't talk politics in my workplace. Why is it so difficult to implement this in education?
I can try to answer that.
I could probably
the answer
that
is,
to some degree because of the whole.
Well, let's let FQ go, and then we'll go from there.
well, I think to a certain degree, I already gave some of the answer. Like, because if you are teaching in a soft subject like literature, or if you're teaching in a softer not as softer, but if you're teaching something like history or literature, you're necessarily eventually going to have to talk about politics. It's not avoidable, at least not if you're going to give a historically accurate account of the book that you're teaching, right? So that's why it's difficult to avoid political speech. When you're teaching something that is inevitably political, it's just unavoidable. But go ahead, Lancelot.
What I'm talking about is personal political speech, not political speech that has to do with the book you're reading, is what I'm advocating that's not discussed.
Well, I have a question about that then. So do you think that it's permissible then for a school to fire a teacher based off of political speech they make on their personal social media accounts?
No. No. No.
Why?
They're not in social media account. They can express
Well,
whatever they want to, as long as it's, I mean, even, well, I mean, there are going to be some limits on that even. I mean, I wouldn't want, a teacher espousing hate speech on a Facebook page that can be viewed by, children and things like that. But go ahead.
Well, I think if I recall correctly, there was a Supreme Court case for student speech off campus that regarded a Snapchat that she sent. Lancelot, you probably could speak to this more in depth than I can, but my understanding is that student was reprimanded for speech made against the school on her Snapchat when she complained about not being chosen for a varsity cheerleading. And essentially it was F the school, and she was giving the middle finger at the camera in their Snapchat. And the ACLU, after this case, in attempting to defend her case, one of the things that they said was the students should not have to carry the school on their backs wherever they go, or something, the paraphrase of that. So the question, I guess, that I have, does that also then apply to teachers? Do teachers carry the school on their backs wherever they go out in public? So maybe not, they don't have free speech, but
They shouldn't.
What if they have an OnlyFans?
They shouldn't. They should be able to have an OnlyFans too. Absolutely.
Fair enough.
Hell yeah.
They shouldn't, but I think at least based on current law, to some extent they do, because at least for public schools, they are considered, government
Why
actors
shouldn't they?
and government.
I've seen several cases with regards to that, and it's always because it becomes impossible to teach once the students discover it. So
If they discover it, yeah.
yeah, and these are all cases where they discovered it. I mean, if no one
Okay.
discovers it, then obviously it's not. You can't.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't fire somebody for something you never discovered. So obviously,
If you have a classroom full of racist kids who won't be taught by a black teacher, would it be permissible for the school to fire the teacher on the basis of being black?
You mean like if they suddenly
No.
found out on social media that their teacher was black?
Well, no. I mean, they show
I
up
had
to
no
class
idea.
and they say, "Well, no. I mean, they show up to class the first day. They see it's first day of the school year. They see their teacher is black. They're like, I hate black people. I'm not going to listen to this person." Would the school, by the same virtue, be able to fire them?
Yeah, no, because it's that's a protected class, right?
Well, yeah, but I think
having an
OnlyFans
OnlyFans account doesn't make you protected class yet. Like now, maybe one day that'll change, but right now, that's a protected class, and
Yeah.
being a porn star isn't.
Lance,
Yes, but
What if you have a white? What if you have a white nationalist in a school full of black kids, in a classroom full of black kids? Can
Yeah, that's
they
another great
get him
question.
fired? Because white people aren't protected class. So, what do you think there?
Well, I think specifically
Well,
the
being a
white
white
nationalists
nationalist is not
isn't
a
a protected
protected
class.
Gotcha.
So, Lancelot, you said that they shouldn't, though you think that under the current law that they do. I'm curious your thoughts of why they shouldn't.
I think it's for the same purposes as why kids, they don't carry it on their back. I feel like once you're relieved of your official duties and you're not at school, then your words should be your own and shouldn't be attributed to, any other association or anything else. And I know a lot of people, like for example, on their Twitter bios, they say, "Oh, my opinions are my own," stuff like that. And I generally, I like that sort of approach. I feel like once you're done as a teacher, you should be able to have your own life. You should be able to have your own opinion without being scared of, that speech kind of being stifled by, having those words attributed to the public school that you represent. But, unfortunately, to some extent, off the top of my head, I don't completely remember, but I know that to some extent what they do outside of school or like certain speech that they have, even if it's their own, it could still be prohibited or you could be fired because of it because you're seen as a government actor. It's government speech in that situation.
Well, I'm not talking about speech in this case. I'm talking about expression. So if on their private social media account, they didn't even have an OnlyFans. They just wanted to do an art piece where they were nude, right? They wanted to do a tasteful art piece where they were nude, and they posted this on their private social media account. The school finds out about it. The school fires them. Was this in your opinion, morally justified firing or no?
Morally?
Yeah, no, I'm not. Let's take legal out of it for the moment. Let's go to morally, right? Because of what Ical said earlier, it becomes impossible to teach the class, does it not?
I agree.
Ban it first of all, but
to some extent, I see why it'd be like, oh, okay, like they saw that they should be fired. Intuitively, I totally understand that. To some extent, I'm inclined to disagree slightly because expression for me is basically the same thing as speech. That's the same thing as speech legally too. So in terms of expression and artistic expression, for me that just has as much value as what somebody says, what somebody thinks. So to some extent, I would kind of disagree with that morally. I feel morally it probably also depends on where it's published. If it's like a non-private account that anybody can just kind of like sign into and it's just kind of there, then I'd be more inclined to be in favor of the firing. But I think there should be factors to consider in that sort of thing.
But also, if the predicate is still true, if it's impossible to teach a class, like getting a class taught is a requisite of the job, right? Like you can't be a teacher and not teach. So if it's still true that it's impossible to teach the class, then at the very least you like move that teacher somewhere where the kids haven't seen him, isn't aware of these photos or whatever. But you can never allow a teacher to be in a class where it's impossible to teach, even if it's not that teacher's fault.
I understand that, and to some extent that's probably why it's allowed to fire somebody for those reasons. And yeah, right. I completely understand that. I don't have like that strong of an opinion. I could empathize with that.
Can I
Okay.
answer
Please.
the flag
Yes,
question?
please do.
So I would never put a flag up in my classroom, and ours is a classroom where we're supposed to be talking about political disagreement, and we talk about politics all the time, every day, 24/7. Like that's what debate class is about. But I still wouldn't do it because to the degree that it's possible, I kind of want to be the neutral arbiter in my class. For instance, right now I have a student who is a Trump supporter, and young kids are very progressive by and large. So he's actually a relative rarity in academic high school debate. And I want to protect him from feeling as if he can't express himself in class. And so often I'll be extra charitable to the arguments that he's putting forth in class because I know he's going to get jumped on by all the other kids. And if I were to tell him, don't get me wrong, like if I'm asked a direct question by a student, like I will answer it. Like I don't make it a secret what my political opinions are, but I absolutely will not express my personal political opinions in class in the context of academic debate unless directly asked. And the vast majority of the time I don't get directly asked. And so that allows me to sort of pose as a Trump supporter in class in order to like have one more voice that supports, that's sort of like tries to steelman like those arguments. Both for that student's benefit, but also for the benefit of all the other students who, going forward, they're going to need to understand as well as possible the opinions that they disagree with. This is one of the reasons why in academic debate, you're affirmative half the time and you're negative half the time. You're not allowed to pick the side of the debate that you're on. You're sort of forced to make arguments that you disagree with. And I find that it's helpful, even for me, even for someone whose job it is to talk about politics all the time, to sort of be a little bit cagey about what my views are.
I think debate ought to be a mandatory class in high school.
Yeah, for sure. I agree.
Based.
I don't know about mandatory classes like these,
They
but
should be mandatory.
Oh, there's gonna be a whole lot of people talking like I talk now, Wick, if that happens.
oh no, see, we're talking about outcomes. Okay, do you really want this? Do you really want to?
Oh, yeah.
Wait,
yeah.
you don't think math should be mandatory? You don't think
No, I
English
think
should be
reading, writing,
mandatory?
arithmetic.
Okay,
And debate. You're debating
All
in your life constantly. I mean,
so
it's
he's not
a
entirely
life skill.
Scott here.
I
It's a
think
life skill
BLM
to
liberal indoctrination should be mandatory. That's my favorite class.
No, no, I don't agree with that at all.
Okay. I want to dig it. Like, so I think I fundamentally disagree with most of you here. I think I just fundamentally disagree. I think if a teacher wants to express their political opinion, they should be allowed to do so. Indoctrination is different from expression, and simply
Oh, really?
expressing
How's it different?
both in intent and in rate, like the rate of it happening and the intensity, time and intensity, right? So, for example, if I simply have a Ronald Reagan poster, right?
You shouldn't, but yeah.
So say if I did a Ronald Reagan poster in my classroom,
Mm-hmm.
just because I like the Ronald Reagan poster, and if I was Republican, I like Ronald Reagan, I think I, as a teacher, should be allowed to do so. I don't think that's indoctrination. I don't think that's a form of that doesn't meet, in at least my standard of being pressuring the students overly so. Similarly, if I was trans and I had a trans flag in my classroom, I think that should be allowed too. If I was married and I had a picture of my family in my classroom, I think that should be allowed too. If I was in favor of Black Lives Matter and I had a Black Lives Matter poster or flag on my thing, I think these are all fine expressions. It should be allowed as long as the time and intensity doesn't exceed a certain threshold. I just don't see the harm in that.
Who are you addressing that to?
Mostly to Killian, but to all of you. Like, what is the harm in this? Like, why?
I agree with you, Wick.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's mostly just the harm of practicality. So, like for instance, I am not a Republican, but if I had that Ronald Reagan poster in the background, right, and we're reading, for instance, I don't know, let's say we're reading, for instance, Animal Farm. In fact, I'm not going to make it a Ronald Reagan poster. Let's say it's a poster of Hillary Clinton, right? Or better yet, Bernie Sanders. And I'm reading, let's say I'm reading Animal Farm, and I'm explaining to the classroom the real history of Animal Farm. I'm explaining to them that, in fact, George Orwell was a democratic socialist, and that his entire point of writing Animal Farm was not to be pro-United Kingdom or pro-United States, but in fact to criticize both of them alongside Stalin, right? If I'm telling that to my students, and then they look up and they see the Bernie Sanders poster behind me, then there's a confusion between the instruction that I'm giving them, how true the instruction is. They might think that I'm simply telling them this piece of instruction because I'm biased and because I like Bernie Sanders. So I could see maybe a Trump supporting student saying or believing, well, you're just saying that because you're a socialist, right? So it causes a lack of faith between the students. And in order for you to be a good interlocutor for your students, in order for you to teach well, it's not just about being neutral, and it's not just about knowing your stuff and teaching well. It's also about your students believing what you have to say and entrusting their education to you. And if you have exposed yourself as a highly biased person and you express your biases all the time, your students may very well not believe you when you're trying to give them a piece of instruction. And so it causes a
and that's
break
my
in
point,
that.
Wick. There's no reason to put up any sort of barrier between a teacher and a student based on that teacher's personal beliefs. That's my whole point.
Yeah, I want to push back on this because I disagree with you, FQ, and you too, Killian. I think that here's the fact of the matter: you are a biased teacher, right? You do have biases.
Yep.
You do have.
It's better to be transparent.
You do have these things, and yes, to FloTrace's point, it would be dishonest to hide that fact. So put your biases out there. Say, hey, gang, just so you know, I am a socialist, and this is my thoughts on this. But, right, I want you to keep that in mind when I'm presenting this information, because one of the things that happens is a lot of times, just real quick, and I'll let you respond. A lot of times what happens is that you're subconsciously, you put your biases into the work while you were trying to be neutral.
Except that's not bias. Can I just quickly say this? That's not bias. Bias. So the term bias is an engineering term. Whether it's conscious or unconscious. Okay, bias comes from it's an engineering term. It comes from, like, for instance, if you look on the radio dial, if you're trying to go to station 90.1 and you point it to 90.1 and it actually takes you to 90.3, that's a bias of 0.2. In other words, bias means that you're unable to understand reality to some degree, and that you have to adjust that. So having an opinion doesn't mean that you're biased. Having what bias means is that there's something that you're missing in the facts as a result of your opinion. Does that make sense? So you can have an opinion. It can be a disclosed one or an undisclosed one, but it's not necessarily biased.
If bias is a bad word for this, right, then fair. But what I'm talking about is the presenting of information in a way that colors the facts, that frames the facts. You can use the same facts, but
you can say framing.
Yeah, framing. Yeah. The framing matters. Yeah. And again, to pretend to neutrality when your framing is not going to be neutral, because as try as you might, you are going to have your implicit beliefs unconsciously frame the narrative you give. I feel that being open and honest with that and having that poster in the classroom does more service to your students than simply pretending to be a neutral arbiter that has no opinion. I want to give Killian a chance to respond because he's been chomping at the bit here. And FloTrace, I see your hand. We're going to get to you next. So go ahead, Killian, and then go ahead, FloTrace. I did address you too, FQ, so if you want to push back on me, that's good. But go ahead, Killian. We'll start with Killian.
Go ahead. I don't remember what it was. Go ahead, 𝖏𝑗𝐻.
Oh, I just will say the only other thing I wanted to say quickly is, because Animal Farm got brought up, once a year I have to teach Animal Farm to kids who are in China. So I'm literally teaching Orwell to Chinese kids. And you can imagine, like, what their perception of my framing is kind of wild. And probably I think the most biased thing I could do would be to be neutral. Like, neutrality is probably more biased than a lot of framing.
Yeah, or sorry, I don't know who's in line right now.
You go ahead.
The other thing I wanted to add on, Wick sort of just stole my thunder there, is the practicality concern that was mentioned earlier. I think it's super impractical to imagine that teachers, even the vast majority of teachers, are going to be able to prevent any sort of bias from leaking in, or for kids to be able to figure it out. You know, I'm sure some teachers, like Ikor, I'm sure you go above and beyond, but the reality is the vast majority of teachers are not going to be so disciplined. And kids are really smart, man, especially when you're talking about getting to the high school level. Like, they're going to know sooner or later. So I think that just plays into which point 100%. It's better to be upfront and say, hey, this is where I'm coming from. If you disagree, that's fine, but you should know that. Transparency is always better than trying to sort of work from the shadows or hide and then behind the scenes try to retroactively account for that bias. And I think more fundamentally, kids should be engaging with maybe a history teacher that disagrees with them. I'm a big libtard, I'm a big libcook, and I remember I had this one history teacher in my class who was very clearly sort of a good old boy conservative, and that was good for me to engage with. When you go, especially when you talk about getting to the level of high school, teachers should not be, being openly biased in the way that they present things. But if they want to give, their perspective, I think that's totally fine, especially when you talk about getting to the high school level. Part of the school is not just meant to teach you literal skills, it's about preparing you for the real world. In the real world, you're going to have to talk to people that you disagree with. You're going to have to put on your big boy pants and your big girl pants, and you're going to have to be like, oh no, there's a person that I disagree with about things that are even relevant to the role I interact with them, right? I disagree with my history teacher that slavery was the real reason for the Civil War. And at a certain point, I think it's better for schools to embrace that in a responsible way than desperately try to push it all back and be like, no, our teachers are perfect robots with no human bias whatsoever. I think it's better to embrace it and have it in a controlled manner.
But if I may ask a question, do we think that there's a difference between how open you are about your personal opinions at the college level, or to a high school senior, or to a high school junior, as opposed to a high school sophomore or a high school freshman, or even in middle school? I think that there's a degree of how open you are about your life.
No, I disagree. I think there's I do think there's a difference, but that difference isn't how open you are. It's the difference in how you present that, right? I think that even for young children, being open about your beliefs, it can be fine if you do it in a age appropriate and environment appropriate way. Say for very young children, I wouldn't be it would go over their head to go over Karl Marx, right? But you can be you can have maybe a flag, right? The Bernie poster or something, right? I don't know, right? I think that's fine. I don't think that's disruptive, and I don't think that is going to be it's not going to be an impediment to learning unless you make it an impediment to learning, which absolutely you can do. If you are sitting there all the time, and don't get it twisted, gang. If you're sitting in the class all the time going over the perils of capitalism, yes, that's a problem. But it's simply having a poster of a communist guy in your class, I think that's fine.
That's in your face all the time.
I have another question for everyone. What do we consider, I know that we're saying personal political beliefs, that teachers should not express their personal political beliefs. I want to be more concrete about what that means. What does that specifically mean? Because the reason I ask is because a teacher's philosophy is arguably political, right? The way in which they teach, the types of books that they bring into the classroom or that they suggest for the curriculum, right? There are lots of ways to be political in a classroom or to be political as a teacher without ever saying who you voted for or what your opinion is on the issues.
It depends on what you're teaching, in my opinion. I mean, if you're teaching math, we don't really care about your political beliefs.
If a math teacher addresses a trans student, should they use their preferred pronouns or the pronouns of their previous gender identity? Because a lot of people would say that's a political statement, and there's a lot of people on both sides who would object.
That's a human rights thing. That's not a political statement. I think if you're asking,
human rights could be political.
You should address them by their pronouns.
Well, I would tend to agree, but I think there's a lot of people out there that would say no, that's political. That's gender nonsense.
See, well,
but the problem is we don't agree. The problem is there's going to be not just minute disagreement, but significant disagreement about big sections of the population who are not going to be willing to meet in the middle, right? By the nature,
you may
of
not be
pronouns,
allowed to use their pronouns in the state of Florida, right?
Yeah, this isn't
that's
a hypothetical.
Example.
There are laws being crafted right now that use these. We've got to keep politics out of the classroom. And how this rubber is meeting the road is it's banning things like using people's preferred pronouns. It's banning things like using an LGBT LGBTQ flag or a pride flag or anything like that. It's not targeting people who have a Ronald Reagan poster. That's being allowed, right? It's this kind of like arbitrary.
It can't be selective. It can't be selective.
But
That's what I'm saying.
It is. That's what I'm saying.
But it shouldn't
this
be.
is a problem. Like,
but the problem is, if you're going to embrace politics as the yardstick, it's almost impossible to draw a clear line. That's the problem with using it. Is it feels really hard to say, okay, this is the stuff that is in the political box, and this is the stuff that is in the political box. It feels like, as a society, given that we govern our rules about almost everything through the means of politics, almost anything could be political depending upon the context, and oftentimes things do become political. So it feels really difficult to say we're just not going to cover politics, especially when many political issues, such as pronouns, such as whether or not the Civil War was about slavery or not, these are not things where you can just say, well, we're just not going to comment on them. You're almost forced by the nature of language to take a position. So I just feel like it feels really worthless to say, well, we're just not going to do politics. I don't think that's a feasible, workable solution.
I approach this problem kind of in the reverse way, which is to say I don't really think about like what my bosses are going to think about it, because again, like everything gets discussed in debate, classrooms and at tournaments. I'm worried more about the chilling effect on students if they feel I'm going to be more sympathetic to some arguments than others. So one of the things that they have to do on a regular basis is, if a new topic comes around, like for instance, the current Lincoln Douglas topic is Supreme Court term limits. Their job is to write these things called disads, short for disadvantages, or to write briefs of other kinds that they turn in that are supposed to be read in round if they're trying to make an argument go in one direction or another. And if they think that I'm going to be more sympathetic to certain kinds of arguments as opposed to others based on my personal beliefs, then that's going to it's going to reduce their creativity. I want them to come up with the arguments that they think work best, that they think they can win with at a tournament, and not really think, what does coach think?
But this neutrality does bend. It puts a thumb on the scale regardless, right? Like now they're going.
Yeah, I'm not neutral. I'm what we in the debate world we call this tabula rasa. It doesn't mean that I'm neutral. It doesn't mean that every argument hits the same. It means that I'm willing to listen to all of the arguments that come through.
And I think regardless of someone's politics, that should I agree with that. I agree that like they should be willing to listen, but that's a different question. That's a different topic than am I willing or able to express my opinion.
I said, I always answer them if they ask me what my beliefs are.
Yeah, but I always try to policy. Right?
But I always try to teach it in such a way or answer those questions in such a way as that it makes clear that I'm able to suspend what my beliefs are in a round, because that's every debate judge is supposed to be able to do that.
I get
you
that.
take out any suspense at all when you put a communist flag on the wall. I know you're a communist. My teacher's a communist.
That's one reason.
So anything
that.
they say, I'm going to put in that's communist. Oh, that's communist. Oh, that's communist. That's what I want to avoid. That's what I'm talking about. That's why you don't need a flag on the wall.
See that flag on the wall? Because you're going to do that anyway, right? You're going to do that anyway.
Not as a teacher.
You should take extra care. No,
you should take extra care in not being take extra care and not being biased.
Political opinions. My political opinion is that you guys should sub to the channel. You guys should like the stream. You guys should donate some subs. Gang, come on, you got to fund me. I don't know.
Guys.
We got one gift sub this whole stream. One. Come on, gang. We can do better than that. I want to get at least 10 before we end today, if we can.
Make it rain.
Yeah, make it throw money at me so we can continue to have these conversations.
Right.
Flowtrace, go ahead.
Killian, if your problem with having the communist flags that's going to color the experience of the students, would you, similar to the OnlyFans situation, still get rid of that teacher, even if they didn't bring it to the classroom, but the students found out and everyone knew?
No, it's on their own time.
Okay.
They want to fly one at their house on a flagpole in their front yard. Do it.
Do
it up.
But then if that's the case, it can't be that the reason why you don't want it in the classroom is because it's going to color the students. Because the students are being colored when they know about the teacher at home.
Well, I didn't know anything about my teachers at home when I was in school.
No, but let's say hypothetically, it came out that a teacher has a communist flag on a flagpole outside his house, which is arguably a way more provocative display. That is going to have the exact same effect of coloring the students' teaching by the teacher as if they were hanging it in the room. But it seems like in the example of the flagpole at home, you're not willing to fire them. So it seems like there's something else going on as the reason to, or not fire them necessarily, but punish them, not allow that.
What do you? That's what other reason would there be? What reason do you think it is?
Well, I don't know. That's why I'm trying to ask you.
Okay.
If it's the case that you don't want that because it's going to color the students, then you should be against a teacher having that giant flagpole at home and the students all finding out about it.
I am not against teachers doing what they want to on their own time. Period. End of story.
Okay. But why is one of these exempt from coloring the way in which
Because
the
you're in
students
a
absorb the
public
information?
school in a classroom with a teacher.
But the
I
effect
may
is
not.
the same.
I never. What I'm saying is, yeah, but it's in your face every day. You can't avoid it, right? When you go to school, you have to go to a public school. Now, if I'm going to say I don't want to drive by that teacher's house because that flag offends me, great. When you go into a classroom, you don't have a choice but to look at it. There is no other choice.
Okay, so then is it just the exposure? Is it not the tainting of the lesson? Because what I'm asking. Okay,
I understand what you're saying. I mean, I get what you're saying, right? It's going to taint it either way. If I see it in the classroom, I'm going to think it's tainted. If I drive by their house and see the communist flag on the pole, I'm going to know it's tainted. It's just that.
So then, for you, just to be clear, tainting isn't enough on its own to restrict these teachers from doing it. There's another component there.
$5
Yeah,
from
yeah.
𝕵𝖎𝖎
Actually, there
Agarwal.
is. Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
we'll
I
get
don't.
to that in
Yeah.
a second. $5 from 𝕵𝖎𝖎 Agarwal. Thank you, 𝕵𝖎𝖎 Agarwal. You are the strongest wicker today. Okay. Should the teacher make an effort to steelman the opposing political view to represent the students and families with those beliefs in the best light? That is his question.
Yes, but it depends on what the issue is. So as a general rule, I don't think any students would say anything terribly provocative, but there's a difference, for instance, like if we're talking about like the history of the Vietnam War, and if a student wants to come in and is wearing a Nazi flag or not, is wearing like the swastika on their shirt and wants to have a conversation about Holocaust denial, right? Obviously, there are going to be limits to what we steelman and what we're willing to tolerate in the classroom. But as a general principle, yes, I do think that's what teachers should try to do.
Yeah, I actually agree.
I agree. And to go back to what Wick was talking about, as well as flow trace and kill him, something that I think is important, especially because we talked about everybody's bias to some degree. And that,
oh dear.
Sorry, I apologize.
Fine.
I don't know what happened there. Everybody's biased to some degree, or that we can't really escape our biases, or at what point does something political become too political? I think kind of the underlying issue, and to kind of mix it also with the law, is that we kind of have to think to ourselves, at what point does this person stop becoming a public official, in that sense, and start becoming a private citizen? Because to some extent, it's like, because everything to some degree can be seen as political, and we're all biased, and it's just a matter of trying to figure out, like placing a flag on the wall. When they do that, are they doing that as a teacher, or are they doing that as the private person that is Mr. or Mrs. X? And we have to draw those lines and think about potentially like situations where we would agree that they're a private person and that's fine for them to do, or in situations where they're steelmanning a position. Are they doing that like because of the instruction and because of the class you're teaching, or are they doing that as like the person and making the caveat like, well, I don't personally believe this, or well, actually I do believe this, but this is just me, and then thinking about like, okay, making that distinction as well, I think is really important.
I think key to making that distinction is the specific role of the public employee. I'm reminded of a case, I believe it was Alito. It might have been Roy Moore. There was a judge who had the 10 Commandments hanging up in his courtroom, and there was a huge controversy over whether or not that should be allowed, or if that was biasing the court. And I think what it ended up coming out was that a higher court said, yes, you need to remove the 10 Commandments from. And I think that's fair when it comes to a judge. But I think we have to be honest when we're talking about a teacher like teaching, biology 101. There's a lot lower of a standard, and I think that needs to be part of the conversation. And I think it's probably a higher standard for teachers that are teaching younger kids, because I do agree what is and isn't appropriate. As FQ said, that changes a lot based off of what age are we teaching these kids. When you're in high school, I think you have an obligation to bring up conflicting points of view. But if you're in 6th grade, bro, like that's not the time to like start explicitly bringing up in the curriculum those things. So I think when we're talking about where the public citizen begins and where the obligations of the public employee begins, there has to be a consideration of the age of the students and what our goal for teaching students is. And I think our goal for high school students is not just to let them know the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It is to prepare them to live in our world, in our society. And a big part of that is dissenting opinions.
10 Commandments, by the way, is coming back to the schools. Like they're passing a bill right now in Texas to require the 10 Commandments to be displayed in every classroom.
Well, they'll overturn it in the Supreme Court, surely.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that should be allowed either.
A
I'm
Supreme
not,
Court
I'm not
question.
being biased here. I mean, I just,
Yeah, I know.
I think any sort of thing should be, none of that should be in school.
Go off of what
Anything that causes conflict between either students or teachers and students.
Is there no room for conflict in school? I don't like this. I don't.
Not with symbol. Not with. Why do you think they're removing
I
from
disagree
schools?
with him on that. I think there can be conflict, but I think you always have to evaluate, like, what are you gaining from the conflict and what are you risking? And I think the answer to that changes depending on the context.
I think it needs to be.
Go ahead.
I think it needs to be in the classes that are. You're going to talk about sociology. There's going to be conflict in sociology. If you're talking about civics, there's going to be conflict in civics classes. Debate, there's going to be conflict in debate classes. To me, you don't need conflict in a math environment or a science environment, right? Unless you're a flat earther or something. But those conflict and that stuff should be in a controlled environment with those teachers that are trained for it, are something they've studied with for their whole life, are used to that type of setting. They know how they need to handle students in those particular areas. Not all teachers know that kind of thing. They just don't. So I don't mind conflict in school, but it should be in a controlled environment, and it should be in subjects that necessitates conflict. I think they should all be mandatory, in my opinion.
In the science class, right there.
I want to give FK FK. I want to give you the floor for a moment, and then we'll go to Flowtrace, and then let's let Scott anything. Go ahead.
I think that some amount of controversy, just being a teacher, even if we put the normal things that we put in the category of politics in a box and we put that on the shelf. So if we forget about trans issues, if we forget about if you forget about communism, if you forget about all these different things and put them on the shelf, and you forget about your personal religious beliefs, the act of being a teacher is still going to be political in some ways. And I'll give you an example of that. One of the examples of that is the phonics controversy. My mom is a reading literacy specialist. So what she does is students come into her classroom, students that need extra help with learning how to read, students that need those extra skills. And one controversy in reading literacy is whether or not you should use phonics to teach students how to read. That was a political controversy for a long time. Some teachers don't have that philosophy. There's the philosophy of what specifically should be included in the history textbooks that you teach. This was an article in the New York Times a few years ago. It was the same textbook. It was published the same year with the same authors, same grade level, same chapter, 2 different states, California and Texas. And the information about the exact same subject was different. The language was changed to suit the different states' preferences on what should be taught within the classroom, right? I am an English literature nerd, as I've stated before. One big name that gets thrown around is Harold Bloom. Harold Bloom was a literary critic in Yale for a long time, and he criticized the Yale School of Deconstructionism because he hated mind. Yeah, and he was extremely critical of the way in which literature was being taught in the classroom. So, like, one of his famous quotes from the anxiety of not the anxiety of influence, but from the Western canon, was about how there are all of these traditional Western authors that are being displaced, and he didn't think that was appropriate. So there are all of these political questions that you're going to have to engage with, even if you're not talking about where you politically align. What's your opinion on Common Core? What's your opinion on physical discipline in school? What's your opinion on inclusion classrooms, right? There are so many things that are deeply political about being in a school system. And I don't think that you can I don't think you can wash your hands of it, even if you try. I think that you are going to have to be political at some point as a teacher, even if you never breathe a word about who you vote for or what you voted for.
I agree with that. But I don't think you need to express that in order to teach that, right? Like Flowtrace's example earlier, where he was arguing with a history teacher about whether the Civil War is fought by slavery, right? The reason was the reason slavery. You can still have that discussion without knowing a teacher's political beliefs.
But if I may push back on that a little bit, I think there's a difference between having a disagreement with a student about the facts that you're talking about and having a teaching philosophy in which the very book that you're presenting the student with is maybe different than they would otherwise want to read, right? So there's a difference between arguing about what really happened during the War of Vietnam and me as a teacher assigning you chapter 12 from 1984, right? That's a political act, whether I like it or not, it is. I'm not sure if we can really escape from that.
Well, and also if kids engage with these materials in a political way, their level of engagement is going to be higher. It's going to be more thoughtful. It's going to, if you have a stake in something, this is one of the reasons why I believe in debate so strongly as a subject to be taught, is because not only are the kids like learning the thing, but now they're siding with one perspective on that thing versus another. And so I've also taught, I've taught AP Lit multiple times, and arguing about Shakespeare, and like one of the big arguments is whether he was Catholic or Protestant. But there's a bunch of stuff. There's queer theory in the sonnets. There's tons of stuff. And when you're engaging with the literature, if you have a perspective that's in disagreement with somebody else and you're arguing about it, your ability to retain that information goes to the roof.
Thank you for the Prime sub, Falsers. So gang,
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you may. Go ahead.
So, to the two teachers in the room, do you believe, though, I mean, just to 𝕬𝖎𝖙 what you just said, do you believe that the students need to know your political beliefs in order to teach that?
No, they don't need to know
sonnets
mine
effectively?
personally, but they need to like be able
Both
to
sides.
express an opinion on it, and then have that opinion clash with somebody else. who's
Right.
in their-
I
who's in
agree.
their-
I agree.
Yeah.
But I think you can do that without me knowing your political beliefs. That's all I'm saying.
No, that's true, but it's a messy enough process to where I agree. Like, I think it was Wick that at one point said they're going to figure it out, and it's true. They are going to figure it out. Like, and I don't try too horribly to hide it. I just try not to make my opinion like the central focus of what's going on in the classroom.
I want
I
to.
agree
Oh,
with-
go ahead.
I agree with what FQ was saying. I don't think there's any real way to kind of escape it. I just think what we could do is just try to formulate roles and places to what extent it's allowable. So, for instance, I would say that inside the class, when they're teaching, doing the actual role of teaching, that it's permissible if it's adjacent to the subject matter. It's like within using the whole reasonable person standard. I'd say that if they're talking about history and there's a question about history that could be rebutted, or there could be like a little debate on it in a reasonable way, I think that's fine. But I feel like this, when it's within the teaching and within classrooms, I feel like that's when it should be most restricted. Anything that's overtly political or perhaps implied a bit too much. I think outside the classroom, in terms of like inside the school, when the teacher's in like their office or class is over and teachers want to approach the student, then I think to a certain extent that limitation is lifted, and it's easier for the teacher to talk about politics or what they want to, so long as the students are trying to engage with it in a meaningful way, I'd say.
So, I do want to respect everyone's time here. We are coming up at the top of the hour. And so I wanted to give everyone a chance to have closing thoughts on this, any kind of closing opinions, and also to shout yourselves out. Let people know where they can find you. If they've liked what you have to say, if they don't know who you are, and you want to find more of their work, please tell people where they can find you and things like that. But I wanted to give this opportunity now and let people do. And also, gang, if you've liked the work on my end, there's a way to show me. Subs, bits, super chats. I appreciate all you've given me, but I need more. I really do. So thank you. We're going to start in the reverse order we started. We're going to go to Lancelot first, and then we're going to work our way and end with FQ. So Lancelot, Killian, then 𝕬𝖎𝖙, and then to FQ. Thank you for the $20, Killian. You're a pro. Go ahead, Lancelot. Start.
So you can find me, like I said, I'm pretty new to this. I'm on Discord. It's Lancelot 8246, and I'm also on Twitter and Twitch as well. I don't really stream, but maybe I will in the future. And for Twitter and Twitch, it'd be Shiny Lancelot, so SHINY, and then Lancelot would be the handle. And overall, I appreciate the discussion, and it was a pleasure talking to all of you.
Thank you for being here. Thanks for bringing your expertise and your knowledge to the discussion. I really value that. So thank you. Killian, go ahead.
Yeah, Killian TV on Twitch and at Killian TV on Twitter, both. We found DGG community. I'm a DGGer. I've been along for a long time.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So my content's mostly on. I'm center right, more center than right, but center right. So I talk a lot about all of those. Also going to be talking about, I'm trying to battle this red pill ideology that is I think is infecting young men's minds about how you become a successful male and how you have relationships with females. Like I said, I'm an IT executive. And and I've been married 20 plus years. So I think I have some good advice to give on how you, and I started out poor, right? I had a single mother. So how you become wealthy properly, and how you treat women properly. So I'm going to be doing some of that content as well. So yeah, just find me over there.
Check him out, gang. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate your perspective. Really do. Thank you. 𝕊𝖍𝖎, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm 𝕊𝖍𝖎. I'm same spelling at Twitter and on Discord. Don't really stream as of yet, but you can find me there that way.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for coming through. We always love future Wick, right? Like to come and give his perspective as a educator and as a person. So thank you again for being here. Thanks for coming. Next, the drama llama himself, 𝕊𝖍𝖎, go ahead.
What's up, y'all? My name is 𝕊𝖍𝖎. You can check me out at twitch.tv/𝕊𝖍𝖎. I'm live now, and I'm going to be live for a bit while longer. Wick, are we doing open after this? Do you know? Are you feeling up to it?
You know what? Not unless we get more money, frankly.
Okay. Well, y'all, if y'all, I think there's some pretty angry people in the chat. If they want to yell, then I would be super
so
down.
if I can get, let's see, if I can get 10 more gift subs or 50 more bucks, any combination thereof, we'll do it. We'll go for it.
Come on,
y'all. We can do that.
We should 20. Come on, guys. Come on. Let's get it.
Anyways, otherwise, I'm going to be live on my channel talking about twitch.tv/𝕊𝖍𝖎, twitter.com/𝕊𝖍𝖎, and I am live in and around the Twitch politics space. Thank you, Wick. Thank you, fellow panelists. And thank you all the viewers at home who are making this possible.
All right, no, thank you for being here. Go check him out, gang. He's really great. He used to be a llama. Now he's a real boy. So check him out. It's awesome. Last,
yeah, he's got good content.
Certainly not least. Fairy Queen, go ahead.
Hi. Thank you very much for having me on. We're starting a podcast. It's going to be an anti-red pill podcast. Check it out. Called the Pink Pill Podcast.
Pick me. Invite me. I want to come talk about it.
No, sure. No, we would love to have you on.
Yeah,
we're just getting started. We're doing a lot of feminist anti-red pill podcast kind of stuff. We're hoping to we're hoping for the podcast to be a kind of a parody of red pill podcasts that you've seen before. So, and we're also looking for an academic perspective on some of these issues. So if you know anybody who would like to talk to us about red pill stuff, somebody who knows their stuff, like a doctor or a professor, somebody who works in the field, send them our way. My Discord is Fairy Queen. We're just getting started and we're excited to see where this goes. So thank you very much for having us on for today.
Well, thank you for being here, gang. She's great. Go give her some love. Send her some follows, things like that. Okay, and with that, we are going to rate out. Let's see who we going to. Well, you're
Did we get
streaming.
the $50?
𝕊𝖍𝖎? No, we didn't get.
I am, although I think my stream just died. Hold on.
Oh, your stream just died. Well, that's.
I don't know what's happening.
Give him a minute. Give him a minute. So, okay, I'll kill time with this. Tomorrow, I will be on Stardust channel. We're gonna talk about homelessness. Okay. Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. We are going to have 𝕊𝖍𝖎𝖙 on. We're going to have 𝕊𝖍𝖎 on. We're going to have a few others on, a few new people on. And we're going to be talking about mental illness and institutionalization. Should we bring back institutionalization of the mentally ill? To be clear, forcible institutionalization. Is that something that society should support or oppose? And in what instances?
Yes.
For either one. That should be a wonderful discussion Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. Next, Friday at also 6 p.m. Eastern, we are going to be hosting a one-on-one debate. Red pill versus blue pill. 𝕊𝖎𝖎 will be coming on to challenge Chris Speaks on what is better for the modern man. Red pill ideology or blue pill ideology. And that will be a rousing debate, which I will moderate and keep from going too off the rails, hopefully. 𝕊𝖍𝖎.
Are you gonna have open mics?
It's coming. Wait.
Is there a third option? Is there like a Sigma pill or something?
Yeah, it's like a black pill. Isn't there a black pill or something too?
Oh yeah. Well,
I want to start the purple
We
pill.
will be discussing that, I'm sure, in the debate.
Purple pill. We're going to start the purple pill.
I saved it. We're back.
Yeah.
So you're streaming again, 𝕊𝖍𝖎?
Yes, sir.
We'll send
my
them
connection
over.
is rated excellent right now.
Are there any okay, yeah, we'll send them over. So gang, make sure you when you get there, you spam those emotes if you got them. let them know that it is a hate raid that we're doing, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Oh, Discord's going to be open for anyone who wants to yell about this.
Bye-bye.
Bye.